Survival rates far worse for Black women after bystander CPR. Study finds survival rates for Black women are far worse after bystander CPR than for white men. According to a study published this month in the American Heart Association journal Circulation. The study highlights a troubling disparity in the effectiveness of bystander CPR for cardiac arrests that happen outside a hospital setting. While bystander CPR generally improves survival rates, its benefits are notably reduced for Black individuals and for women, according to the study. The study looked at more than 623,000 patient records and found that nearly 40% of people who experienced cardiac arrest outside of a hospital received CPR from a bystander. A bystander is defined by the study as a non-professional responder like a family member or passerby. CPR can be performed simply by doing hard and fast chest compression, doubling or tripling a person's chance of survival, according to the American Heart Association. Dr. Paul Chan, a cardiologist at St. Luke's Mid-America Heart Institute in Kansas City and the lead author on the report, told CNN that the goal of the study isn't to prove what is already known. Communities of color are less likely to receive CPR. Rather, the goal is to answer a twofold question: did CPR get started by a bystander, and does the patient have the same benefit, regardless of their sex or race or ethnicity? It's not just getting people to start CPR, but doing it as effectively and as well in all groups of people, Chan told CNN. The study reveals that on average, those who received bystander CPR had a 28% higher chance of survival compared with those who did not. However, survival outcomes varied significantly by race and gender. White men who received bystander CPR were 41% more likely to survive than if they didn't receive CPR, while Black women had the lowest rate, with only a 5% greater chance of survival than if they didn't receive CPR. The study suggests that variability in dispatcher training and resources could lead to lower quality dispatcher instructions for CPR in Black communities. The authors also note low CPR training rates in communities of color. Both of these factors could contribute to a disparity in survival rates. However, the study notes that future research is needed to determine the reasons why the association between bystander CPR and survival is weaker for Black individuals and women. Chan called the findings alarming. If we think of somebody with cancer, and let's say there's a very effective treatment for breast cancer or colon cancer, we worry about if there are differences in starting treatment for cancer, if women or Black individuals have a lower likelihood of receiving effective chemotherapy or treatment. But would we also be concerned if, when that treatment is started, the benefit is much less for certain groups of people? He asked, what's different about bystander CPR compared to a medication is that a medication can be standardized. You have a certain dose, let's say, of chemotherapy minus 50 milligrams, and everybody gets 50 milligrams. But with CPR, the quality and type of intervention may vary widely depending on who is performing it. Chen says that people might be uncomfortable performing CPR on a woman because mannequins used in formal CPR training typically don't have breasts. Jade Calvin, a critical care paramedic at Bell Ambulance in Milwaukee, has been a dedicated emergency services professional for nearly 8 years and now works in the education department as a CPR instructor, teaching new protocols. People are more hesitant to do CPR on women, Calvin told CNN. If you think of men, it's more socially acceptable. It's normalized for them to have their chest exposed, but not for women. So when they go to do CPR, people are scared because they want to keep the woman's modesty intact. Calvin also noted that when CPR is performed on women, there is often fear about delivering effective compressions. It's always said that you're supposed to push hard and fast, she said. However, society generally thinks that women are more dainty and fragile than men are, so they're scared of doing more effective CPR. You are going to break ribs. It's okay, Calvin said, you just push hard and fast. Someone will take over soon enough. Chen says it's more difficult to understand the racial disparities in the benefits of bystander CPR. We looked at the benefit of bystander CPR when the victim collapsed in the Black and Hispanic community, he said. The only group that didn't get a benefit was Black individuals in Black and Hispanic communities. Chen said the quality of CPR is not necessarily always worse in Black and Hispanic communities, because we're not seeing it when Hispanic and white individuals get bystander CPR in those communities. Chan says the American Heart Association and the American Red Cross have significantly intensified their efforts to boost CPR training in historically underserved communities. These communities are now the focus of increased outreach and education initiatives to address long-standing disparities. Reflecting on her experiences, Calvin noted that when she first started in EMS, she was often the only woman or the only person of color in the workplace. She stressed the importance of representation in training. It's important for people to see people that look like them doing these training sessions. Calvin is optimistic about the growing diversity in the field. Little boys and girls are seeing people that look like them, saving lives, which is going to make them want to do the same thing. What parents don't know about student drug use. Rarely a week goes by when I don't receive a frantic text or call from a desperate parent whose college-age kid is in an emergency room being treated for a drug-related problem. Young adults ages 18 to 25 make up 11.1% of the more than 7.7 million drug-related annual emergency room visits in the United States. And they have the highest rate of cannabis-related visits, according to a 2023 report by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA. I'm a family physician and college health expert, and parents often lean on me to help them figure out what to do when their child is in crisis, which gives me a third title, Medical Mythbuster. Before you send your teens off to college, it's worth exploring the myths and realities around college drug use to get a better view of what parents can do to keep their young adult children safer in this new cultural climate. Here are some of the most dangerous myths I hear, and my advice to combat them. Myth No. 1. I don't need to talk to my children about drugs because they are good kids. False. It's mind-boggling to parents that their smart, successful, law-abiding teen would suddenly start using drugs. Parents can't imagine why their responsible child would trust a seedy stranger offering them pills or weed. In my experience, even if your children are straight-A students, Eagle Scouts, or their high school's Volunteer of the Year, they may still try drugs. That's why you may get a call about them experiencing a drug overdose, hallucinations, paranoia, depression, or a drugged or alcohol-related car crash. Myth number 2. My kid knows to stay away from seedy drug dealers. False. Most college drug dealers don't look like whatever you imagine scary criminals look like. They actually look like typical undergrads because they often are. So, erase the image of a heroin exchange in a dark alley and replace that with a concerned friend in a dorm. Here's how it can start. Let's say your child hasn't slept in several days because they are studying so hard for chemistry. A friend might offer some pills so they get some rest and ace that test tomorrow. What if they can't stay awake but need to finish that term paper that's due tomorrow morning? They may try a friend's study aid pill, often an attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, stimulant available by prescription. Is their social anxiety causing a near panic attack before they head out to a party? They may try a THC-laced gummy candy to feel fine. Tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC, is the primary psychoactive substance in cannabis. Could there be anything more innocent-looking than an animal-shaped gummy? Not only are the edible THC products deliberately packaged in juvenile, brightly colored graphics, but the edibles look like childhood gummies, brownies, chocolate bars, chips, and more. These THC edibles circumvent the bad things we've warned our kids about, such as smoking, inhaling, or pill-taking. Even kids who would never light a cigarette or joint may be tempted to try a bite of candy. Myth No. 3. We experimented with weed in our college days and turned out fine, so our kids will, too. Maybe false. College kids aren't just experimenting anymore. Cannabis use has become very common across college campuses, whether it is legal in your kid's state or not. In a 2022 study of more than 14,000 students enrolled in 19 Texas colleges where recreational cannabis is still illegal, nearly 40% of students had used cannabis, and more than 26% had used it on their college campus, according to a 2023 study. Furthermore, today's weed is stronger than what you may have used. The THC of the 1980s and earlier was not considered addictive because there was no identifiable withdrawal syndrome. According to addiction psychiatrist Dr. Elizabeth Stein, The concentration of THC has spiked from less than 1.5% in 1980 to 3.96% in 1995 to an average of 16.14% in 2022. As noted by the National Institute of Drug Abuse, based on cannabis samples seized by the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration. The marijuana flower produced in Colorado now has an average of 19.2% THC per gram. Concentrate products, such as hash or oils, average 67.8% per gram. And vaporizer cartridges average 79.7% THC per gram, according to the 2020 Colorado Market Size and Demand Update Report. Today's weed is indeed addictive for at least 1 in 6 teens and 1 in 10 adults, according to SAMHSA, while the overall odds may be with you. There is no way to predict whether you will be one of the 16.7% of teens or the 10% of adults who become addicted. Myth number 4. Only hardcore partiers use drugs in college. False. Outside of the party drug culture, I see more college students self-medicating. Students are looking for a way either to stay alert and focused or to calm down their brain's anxiety to study, sleep, and socialize more effectively. They are not looking for a buzz. They are trying to reach a functional norm. Meanwhile, while nearly everyone is aware of the fentanyl crisis, few college students see significant risk in accepting or buying what they believe is a prescription pill of Xanax or Adderall. The drug dealers likely perceive minimal risk because they are often selling products that they are using themselves. Myth no. 5. My child is not a drug dealer. May be false. I have been fascinated that many students who are selling drugs do not consider themselves drug dealers. They are usually shocked and offended when I use those words and talk about the serious legal consequences of selling prescription medications. There is clearly a disconnect in their mind between their actions and people selling non-prescription illegal drugs. Some students sell a portion of their own appropriately prescribed ADHD stimulants or other medications, and those pills are often shared or resold. This practice likely adds to the misconception that other pills offered by peers are also safe, legally manufactured, and prescribed pills. Fact: parents can prepare their children for the reality of drugs and college life. True. First, be sure you add Narcan spray, an opioid antagonist that can immediately reverse fentanyl overdose, to your student's college first aid kit. Narcan is available without a prescription, though you will likely need to ask for it from a pharmacist because most stores are keeping it behind the counter to avoid shoplifting of the product, which sells for roughly $44 for 2 units. Talk your teen through Narcan's directions, but it is simple to use. The spray is a single-dose unit that you spray with 1 squirt into the victim's nose after laying them on their back. If the struggling to breathe or unconscious victim does not have fentanyl or any other opioid in their system, Narcan will not cause any harm. Make sure your teen knows to always call 911 and stay with the victim if they administer Narcan. A second dose may be required. Second, actively encourage your student to seek medical help if they complain about an inability to focus or concentrate on their studying, if they can't sleep, or if they feel panicked with social or test anxiety. Counseling and legitimately prescribed medications can do so much to help these issues, and this is a large part of what college health services treat. Reassure them not to wait till they are at crisis levels to seek help, whether it is for a physical illness, injury, stress, anxiety, or depression. Especially with mental health issues, students will try everything to self-help and self-medicate, and that's exactly how many good kids end up using drugs. What we know about the 6 hostages who Israel says were killed by Hamas in Gaza. The bodies of 6 hostages held by Hamas have been recovered in an underground tunnel in Gaza, Israel's military said Sunday. The captives, including an Israeli American, were among the more than 200 people taken by the militants into Gaza following their deadly cross-border rampage on October 7. 5 of them were taken from an Israeli music festival where hundreds were killed and dozens more were kidnapped by Hamas fighters. The 6th was captured from a nearby farming community, according to the Hostages Families Forum, which has coordinated efforts to highlight the plight of the captives and their families and push for their release. The Israel Defense Forces, IDF, said their bodies were found in a Hamas-run tunnel under the city of Rafah, and that they were brutally murdered a short while before troops were able to reach them. The location was approximately 1 kilometer (0.6 miles) from the tunnel where another hostage was rescued alive days earlier, an IDF spokesperson added. 3 of the 6 hostages, whose bodies were recovered, were expected to be released during the first phase of an eventual ceasefire agreement, two Israeli officials have told CNN. Hersh Goldberg Polin, Eden Yerushalmi, and Carmel Gat were slated to be released as part of the humanitarian category, based on the framework Israel and Hamas agreed to in early July, the officials said, with one of them adding, "Our prime minister delayed it. Here's what we know about the hostages." Hersh Goldberg Polin, the 23-year-old Israeli-American, became one of the most recognizable faces of the enduring hostage crisis, after he was taken at gunpoint by Hamas militants from the Nova Music Festival. Banners and murals demanding his return were often displayed in Jerusalem and around the world. When Hamas gunmen poured into southern Israel on October 7th, Goldberg Polin and his friends were forced to hide inside a small bomb shelter. As the militants began to lob grenades into the bunker, Goldberg Polin rushed to throw them out before his arm was blown off from the elbow down, according to a first-hand account from his friend. Goldberg Polin's parents, John Polin and Rachel Goldberg Polin, have been among the most vocal of the hostage families, pushing Netanyahu to seek a deal securing their relatives' return. They have also regularly met top U.S. officials in Washington to press the case of the hostages and gave an emotional address at this month's Democratic National Convention. Born in Oakland, California, Goldberg Polin immigrated to Israel with his family at age 7. An elder brother to 2 sisters, he was a happy-go-lucky, laid-back, good-humored, respectful and curious person who loved soccer and music, according to his family. He had been obsessed with geography and travel since he was a little boy, his mother said. Alexander Lobanov, the 32-year-old father of 2, from the coastal city of Ashkelon in southern Israel, was also kidnapped from the Nova Music Festival, where he was working as a bar manager. Testimonies indicate that Lobanov helped evacuate people at the festival and ran with 5 others into the Be'eri forest, where he was later captured by Hamas gunmen. Lobanov is survived by his wife and 2 children, a 2-year-old and a 5-month-old. His younger child was born while he was in captivity. Carmel Gat, the 40-year-old from Tel Aviv, was staying at her parents' home in the border kibbutz of Be'eri in southern Israel when Hamas fighters broke in at around 10 a.m. on October 7th and forcibly took her away. Be'eri was one of the hardest-hit communities in the October 7th attacks, with Hamas killing 101 of its residents, including children. 30 people were abducted from the kibbutz that day. After 50 days without a sign of life, Gat's family received testimony from returned hostages who described her as their guardian angel. To help them endure captivity, she taught them meditation and yoga. The occupational therapist was full of compassion and love, and always finding ways to support and help others, according to the Hostages Families Forum. She loved solo travel, meeting new people, and live rock music. She was particularly fond of English rock band Radiohead, Almog Sarusi. The 27-year-old was at the Nova Music Festival with his girlfriend of 5 years. When the attack happened, the pair tried to escape by car, along with friends, but his girlfriend was shot and severely injured. Sarusi stayed by her side in a desperate attempt to save her. She died, and he was subsequently captured and taken to Gaza. According to the Hostages Families Forum, Sarusi was remembered as a positive person who loved traveling around Israel in his white SUV with his guitar, according to the forum. Eden Yerushalmi, the 24-year-old from Tel Aviv, was working as a bartender at the Nova Music Festival on October 7th. When sirens sounded, she sent a video of rocket fire to her family group chat, saying she was leaving the party, according to the Hostages Families Forum. As Hamas fighters went about their rampage, Yerushalmi called the police, describing the situation and pleading, "Find me, okay?" For 4 hours, she spoke with her 2 sisters, May and Shani, who heard everything she went through as she tried to escape. Her last words were, "Shani, they've caught me." Those who knew Yerushalmi described her as a vibrant young woman with many friends and hobbies. She loved spending summer days at the beach playing paddleball, attending parties, and was studying to become a Pilates instructor. According to the Hostages Families Forum, Ori Danino, the eldest of 5 siblings, the 25-year-old planned to study electrical engineering. The Jerusalem native was kidnapped from the Nova Music Festival while driving back to help others escape. According to the hostages' families forum, he was the son of Einov and Elchanan and partner to Leal. Ori was known for his ambition, love for people, and was beloved by all, the forum said. He loved nature and was very handy. White woman found guilty of manslaughter with a firearm for fatally shooting black neighbor amid dispute over kids playing. A Florida jury on Friday found a 60-year-old white woman guilty of manslaughter with a firearm for fatally shooting an unarmed black mother during an ongoing dispute over children playing near her home. The panel had considered whether Susan Lawrence was justified under the state's controversial self-defense laws for shooting through the front door of her Central Florida apartment last June and killing 35-year-old Ajik A.J. Owens, who had been knocking on Lawrence's door. The trial tested the state's Stand Your Ground law, which allows people to use deadly force in self-defense in certain situations. Lawrence was charged with manslaughter with a firearm and pleaded not guilty. She faces up to 30 years in prison, according to State Attorney Bill Gladson's office. No sentencing date has been set. Lawrence, wearing a purple sweater over a dark dress, stood and showed no emotion as the verdict was read and the jury polled. Friends and members of the victim's family wept in the front row. "This has been a long journey to get to this day, to get to this verdict," the victim's mother, Pamela Diaz, told reporters outside the Ocala courthouse. "I am very pleased with the jury, the prosecution, the verdict. I find some peace with that verdict. I feel that although my daughter is gone forever, the children's mom is gone forever, we've achieved some justice for Ajik. My heart is a little lighter, and we're now on the path to healing," a family representative said. The victims for children were still in counseling, and now it was up to the court to impose the maximum penalty. Ben Crump, an attorney for the victim's family, said they were profoundly grateful for the guilty verdict. A.J. Owens was a devoted mother whose life was tragically cut short, leaving her children, including a young son who witnessed this horrific act, to carry the burden of her loss, he said in a statement. While nothing can erase the pain they've endured, today's decision sends a clear message that senseless violence will be met with accountability. After the verdict, a member of the defense team, Amanda Sizemore, declined to comment. After deliberating for about half an hour, jurors asked to rehear to 911 calls Lawrence made that night. In one from before the shooting, Lawrence told a dispatcher she was really scared, with little emotion in her voice. "Are you or anyone else in danger right now?" The dispatcher asked. "I locked my door," she responded. During the second 911 call, which took place after the shooting, Lawrence sounds as if she is crying, her voice barely audible. She said someone tried breaking down her door and that she fired at the door. The jury, which deliberated about 2.5 hours, later asked another question about damage to the door to Lawrence's home. "She has no duty to retreat." In his closing argument, prosecutor Rich Buxman told jurors Lawrence admitted pulling the trigger and killing Owens. "It wasn't an accidental situation. It wasn't a situation where she slipped and the gun accidentally went off and shot the door and struck Ms. Owens," Buxman said. "That's not what we have here. She intentionally fired it. There's no doubt that the defendant intentionally committed an act which caused the death of Ajik Owens," Buxman said. Lawrence acted with utter disregard for the life of others. "She pointed a loaded firearm towards a door, towards a person that she knew was there in the opposite side of the door, and intentionally pulled the trigger. That shows a reckless disregard for human life," he told jurors. In her closing argument, Sizemore told jurors the case is one of perception. "The Constitution of our country embodies the right to be able to defend ourselves," said Sizemore, whose remarks followed the prosecution's closing argument. "The law demands that we assess the reasonableness of that perception, not from the comfort of a courtroom. But we have to take ourselves back to the perspective of the moment itself. Under Florida law," Sizemore said, "citizens have the right to defend themselves in the face of imminent danger. She has no duty to retreat, and she can stand her ground when she is in her dwelling if she is faced with imminent danger," she said of Lawrence. Sizemore described Lawrence as an older woman with medical issues who lived alone in a troubled neighborhood when one night she was startled by a barrage of screaming, profanities, and banging on her door. In that circumstance, it's what Susan Lawrence reasonably believed was necessary to prevent. That's a very important word, prevent. The law does not say that you have to wait to get punched or attacked before you can do something. You can use deadly force to prevent someone from coming into your home and hurting you or attacking you, Sizemore said. So how do we decide whether somebody is justified in using deadly force? The defense lawyer asked. You must consider the circumstances at the time the force was used, all of it. The fact that she's in her home, she's alone, it's nighttime. Her knowledge of A.G. Owens and her past interactions with her. The noise level, with the pounding and the screaming of the profanities. Lawrence decided to not testify at her trial, while the defense has maintained Lawrence had no choice but to shoot. Buxman countered that line of reasoning Friday morning, saying in order for the defendant to lawfully use deadly force, the threat to her life must be imminent. It had to be ready to happen. It had to be staring her in the face, such as she had to act at that moment to protect her life, the prosecutor said in his closing remarks. If Ms. Owens would somehow have managed to bust through this locked, dead-bolted metal door, enter her house, and start coming at her, the defendant may have had a right to shoot. But that's not the situation we have here. On Thursday, Lawrence told the court, after consulting her attorneys, she had decided not to testify. The defense rested after calling expert witnesses on ballistics and police training who testified about where Lawrence was standing when she opened fire and her state of mind at the time of the shooting. A day earlier, jurors heard testimony from Marion County Sheriff's Detective Ryan Stith, the lead investigator in the case. Prosecutors asked Stith to read a letter Lawrence reportedly wrote to Owens for Children after he informed her she would be charged in Owens' death. I am so sorry for your loss, Stith read to the court. I never meant to kill your mother. I was terrified your mom was going to kill me. I shot out of fear. Outside the courthouse, Daesh told reporters before the verdict was announced she struggled to maintain her composure throughout the trial. Difficult is putting it very mildly, Daesh said. The amount of emotions, the disgust, the anguish, the pain, to sit there literally feet away from the woman who took my daughter's life. I have to dig deep within my strength, my faith to hold it all together. In the video of her first interrogation, shown to jurors Wednesday, Lawrence tells detectives she'd previously argued with Owens about her children playing loudly and leaving toys outside her home. But she tells police the situation escalated on June 2, 2023, after she confronted the children about the noise and threw their roller skates. Lawrence tells detectives she called the police that evening to report neighborhood children had threatened to kill her. She says dispatchers told her to lock her door and officers were on the way. But before police could arrive, Lawrence tells detectives, Owens began banging on my door and saying, I'm going to kill you. She banged so hard it looked like my door was going to fly off, Lawrence said in the video. And I panicked and I was like, oh my God, she's really going to kill me this time, you know? And so, I don't even remember picking the gun up, I just remember shooting. World No. 1 Jannik Sinner gears up for US Open with Cincinnati Open win. World No. 1 Jannik Sinner saw off the challenge from home favorite Frances Tiafoe to win the men's Cincinnati Open title on Monday. The Italian admitted he was struggling with fatigue after a taxing tournament, but still found a way to beat his American opponent in the final in straight sets, 7-6 for 6-2. It was a very difficult week, tough week. I'm very happy about today's match, he said after his match. It was very tough mentally, had such an amazing run here, and I tried to do my best today. We both were quite tired from yesterday, we both felt a lot of tension, but I'm very glad about the level I played today, especially in the important moments. Sinner appeared to be hampered by a hip injury at times in Cincinnati, but found a way to secure his 5th title of the season. He battled through tough matches against Andrei Rublev in the quarterfinals and Alexander Zverev in the semis to set up a clash with Tiafoe, who himself came back from a set down against Holger Rune in the semifinals. In the final, it was Sinner's booming ground strokes that made the difference, with his power and accuracy too much for Tiafoe to handle. After winning a first-set tie-break, the 23-year-old Italian then breezed through the second set to become the youngest male winner of the tournament since Andy Murray in 2008. US Open preparation. The win will breathe fresh confidence into the Italian's game. He heads to New York for the US Open, where he hopes to win his second major title. The final Grand Slam of the year will begin on Monday. I'm very happy to be in a position where I am and just trying to keep going mentally. having this hunger to keep playing, and hopefully, I can show some good tennis also in New York, Sinner added. For Tiafoe, the run to the Cincinnati Open final marked an uptick in form during a season where he's admitted to struggling with performances. "I've been struggling for a really long time, so to have a week like this really means a lot," he said after the match. World's oldest person, Maria Bráñez Moreira, dies aged 117. The world's oldest person, U.S.-born Maria Bráñez Moreira, has died at the age of 117, her family announced on social media. Guinness World Records (GW) also released a statement confirming her death at the age of 117 years, 168 days, making her the 8th oldest person with a verifiable age in history. Maria passed away peacefully at the nursing home in Catalonia, Spain, where she resided for the past 2 decades, read the GWR statement, which added that she died on Monday. On Tuesday, Moreira's family published a post on her X account announcing her death. "She has gone the way she wanted, in her sleep, at peace, and without pain," reads the post. Her family added that Moreira told them shortly before her death, "I don't know when, but very soon this long journey will come to an end. Death will find me worn down from having lived so much, but I want it to find me smiling, free, and satisfied." Moreira was named the world's oldest living person by GWR in January 2023 after the death of French Noon sister André at the age of 118. She told GWR that she had lived such a long life thanks to order, tranquility, good connection with family and friends, contact with nature, emotional stability, no worries, no regrets, lots of positivity, and staying away from toxic people. "I think longevity is also about being lucky. Luck and good genetics," she added. Her birth on March 4, 1907, came less than 4 years after the Wright brothers launched the first-ever power-driven flight, and 2 years before construction had even begun on the ill-fated Titanic. Moreira was born a year after her parents emigrated to the U.S. from Spain. 8 years later, the family moved back, arriving in Barcelona during World War I. Moreira's life has also spanned the Spanish Civil War and World War II. She spent the last decades of her life in a nursing home in Catalonia, where, despite her advancing years, Moreira used X, with a little help from her daughter, to communicate with her thousands of followers. "I am old, very old, but not an idiot," her bio reads on the social media platform. Moreira is believed to be among the oldest people to have recovered from COVID-19, having tested positive for the virus in May 2020, according to the Gerontology Research Group, a scientific non-profit which validates the ages of people aged at least 110. The oldest living person is now a 116-year-old Japanese woman named Tomiko Ituka. The title of the oldest person ever recorded belongs to Jean-Louise Comment. Born on February 21, 1875, her life spanned 122 years and 164 days, according to GWR. Wreck of torpedoed World War I warship found in amazing condition for more than 100 years. The otherworldly wreck of a British warships at lost on the seabed, covered in barnacles and seaweed, after it was torpedoed by a German U-boat during World War I. Now, specialist divers working with Lost in Waters Deep say they believe they have found the wreck of the HMS Hawke, which sank on October 15, 1914, off the coast of Scotland, the organization posted on Facebook on Monday. "She's lying on her starboard side and under there. Seems to be quite intact," Will Schwartz, one of the divers, told CNN in a phone interview on Friday. "The guns look as if they're still active. They're so highly polished, it's unbelievable. I've never seen guns like that, in such amazing condition. It's absolutely beautiful. But we're very aware that 524 lads lost their lives on it. It took just 7 minutes for the warship to slip beneath the waves once it had been hit," Schwartz said, adding that historians believe the ship's magazine, where ammunition was stored, exploded. As a result, 524 sailors lost their lives, including many cadets who were younger than 18 years old. "The youngest to die in the shipwreck was a 14-year-old cadet," Schwartz said. To identify the wreck's location, Lost in Waters Deep and Buchan divers, two organizations that work to identify Scottish shipwrecks, initially gathered evidence, such as the logbooks from the German U-boat that fired the torpedo and ships in the area that survived the strike. Armed with that information, the team examined the Admiralty charts in the area and scanned the seabed in the local area in attempt to find the ship. The actual charts show there's an obstruction in the area where we considered the wreck would have been, Schwartz said. We actually went to that to find there was nothing there, but fortuitously we ran over a large object on the seabed, which we decided looked ship-shape enough to try to dive on it. Once the divers came across the object, they descended to 110 meters 361 feet below the surface, where they discovered the long-lost shipwreck this past Sunday, Schwartz said. Due to the depth of the shipwreck, they were only able to stay for about 20 minutes and returned on Wednesday for another exploratory dive, he added. You can't see personal human remains, he said, but you can see crockery, cups and saucers. Some of the bridge gear is still there and navigation equipment. She's in surprisingly good condition. You can still see the teak decks. The wood is still there. While the divers didn't come across any identifying features, such as a named bell, that would conclusively prove that the wreck is indeed the HMS Hawk, they are virtually certain of their discovery. There's only one warship in that area which has been registered lost, and the fact that she matches the identifying features of an Edgar-class destroyer means that she can only be the Hawk, Schwartz said. Divers might try to recover such an identifying feature in the future, Schwartz added, although he noted that there's no way she's anything else other than the HMS Hawk. Sweden confirms first case of Mpox. Sweden confirmed its first case of the viral infection Mpox on Thursday, which was also the first case outside Africa. A day after the WHO declared the disease a global public health emergency for the second time in 2 years. The person was infected while staying in a part of Africa where there was a large outbreak of the disease, Olivia Wigzell, Director General at the Swedish Public Health Agency, told a press conference. The World Health Organization made its announcement over Mpox, which spreads through close contact, after an outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo spread to nearby countries of a more serious type of the disease. We have now also during the afternoon had confirmation that we have one case in Sweden of the more grave type of Mpox, the one called Clade I, Health and Social Affairs Minister Jacob Forsund told the press conference. Wigzell said the person who was infected had received care and instructions in line with the health agency's recommendations. The case is the first caused by Clade I that has been diagnosed outside the African continent. The affected person has also been infected during a stay in an area of Africa where there is a large outbreak of Mpox Clade I, she said. Exclusive: the Chicks to sing national anthem at the DNC. The Chicks will perform the national anthem on Thursday night at the Democratic National Convention. Multiple sources told CNN. The country music group, formerly known as the Dixie Chicks, are set to take the stage on the closing night of the DNC to kick off the evening when Vice President Kamala Harris will make her speech. The Chicks performing at the national anthem is a notable booking for the convention, not just because of country music's historically conservative-leaning fan bases, but because of the band's past that has infamously intertwined with politics. In 2003, before the invasion of Iraq, the band's lead singer Natalie Main said at a concert that the group, which got its start in Dallas, did not endorse the war and were ashamed the President of the United States is from Texas. Their remarks about then-President George W. Bush triggered boycotts and backlash from fans, resulting in country stations across the country pulling the group's music from the radio. At the time, in March 2003, CNN reported that station managers said their decisions were prompted by calls from irate listeners who thought criticism of the president was unpatriotic. This will not be the first convention appearance for the Chicks, who also performed at the virtual 2020 DNC during the pandemic. Both of this year's political conventions have made much more of a splash, returning to their large-scale, live, and in-person formats. The DNC, in particular, has brought a revitalized Hollywood energy with a slew of celebrity appearances, performers, hosts, and a lively music-filled roll call. The Chicks, made up of Maines, Marty McGuire, and Emily Strayer, are one of the best-selling female bands and country groups in music history. The band has won 13 Grammys, 10 CMA Awards, and 8 ACM Awards. The Chicks are the latest country stars to be recruited by the DNC this week, showcasing a shift in the historical leanings of many artists in the genre, and perhaps some of their audiences, who the Harris-Walz campaign hopes will turn up to the polls. In recent years, as new artists have risen in the country music scene, the genre has seen some younger and more progressive stars. On Monday, country singer Mickey Guyton performed on opening night at the DNC. For me, this is beyond a genre of music, Guyton told CNN about her DNC performance. This is about humanity. This is about the culture. This is about our country, and I feel honored to be able to witness history. On Wednesday, Maren Morris performed at the convention. The singer is perhaps the most vocal liberal country star, speaking loudly about LGBTQ+ rights and women's rights. In 2023, Morris told the LA Times she was distancing herself from country music because of the conservative-held views that she found problematic within the industry. "I thought I'd like to burn it to the ground and start over," she told the outlet of country music. "But it's burning itself down without my help." In 2022, Morris got into a high-profile public spat with conservative country star Jason Aldean over gender-affirming health care. Aldean, who is one of Donald Trump's biggest supporters in the music industry, attended the Republican National Convention last month. He did not perform, but sat with Trump in his VIP box. When the former president took the stage at the RNC, he hailed Aldean as the biggest star in country music. Country rock star Kid Rock performed at the RNC, bringing Chance of Fight, and Trump into a mashup of his songs Cowboy and American Bada, which he sang just before Trump took the stage for his speech. "He became a friend of mine over the last 10 years, and he's amazing," Trump said of Kid Rock. "Everyone loves him." The world's largest iceberg is spinning in an ocean vortex with no end in sight for months. A gargantuan iceberg has been slowly spinning in one spot in the Southern Ocean, and it could continue to stay trapped in this vortex for quite some time, experts say. As the world's largest iceberg, the Colossus Eta 3A is of great interest to scientists who have closely monitored the frozen block since it capped from Antarctica's Filchner ice shelf in 1986. Now, the iceberg's fate is unclear as it remains stuck as a result of a rare set of circumstances that scientists say is unprecedented. "This has never happened before as far as we all know," said Dr. Les Watling, a professor emeritus of life sciences with the University of Hawaii at Manoa, in an email. The roughly 3,672 square kilometer, 1,418 square mile chunk of ice, slightly bigger than Rhode Island and more than twice the size of the city of London, drifted over a seamount and got stuck in a phenomenon known as a Taylor column, a spinning vortex of water caused by ocean currents hitting the underwater mountain. The currents create a cylindrical motion of the water above the seamount, where the iceberg now floats, rotating about 15 degrees a day, according to the British Antarctic Survey. The curiously spinning berg is slowly melting, but won't impact rising sea levels, experts say, and instead highlights the fascinating life cycle of icebergs and how the climate crisis impacts Antarctic ice sheets. A jumbo iceberg, currents, and an underwater mountain. When the floating mass initially broke off from the ice shelf in the 80s, it didn't get far before grounding on the bottom of the Weddell Sea, melting in place for over 3 decades. It eventually loosened enough in 2020 to start a gradual drift toward the world's greatest ocean current system, the Antarctic Circumpolar Current. But when the iceberg reached the current in the spring, instead of being sent into the slightly warmer waters of the South Atlantic Ocean, its journey was halted once more. The frozen block is slowly rotating above an underwater mountain named Peary Bank Seamount, which is about 1,000 meters (3,280 feet) tall. The iceberg, which measures about 61 by 59 kilometers (about 37.9 by 36.7 miles), is slightly smaller than the mountain, and is at that sweet spot in size, where it's retained by the column, but it doesn't stick out of the column too much. So, it doesn't get pushed away very easily, said Dr. Alexander Burley, a physical oceanographer with British Antarctic Survey. The research institute noticed the peculiar spin when satellite imagery revealed the iceberg stuck in one spot near the South Orkney Islands, Burley said. Because the spin is so slow, it's not visible when looking at the berg in real time. We have studied these Taylor columns in the past, not specifically to do with icebergs, but because they're really kind of cute, interesting oceanographic phenomena which have important implications for ocean circulation, Burley said. The thing about them is they tend to be quite small. So, the seamount that it's currently over is only about 100 kilometers (62 miles) across and is quite a small target. It had to get into the small area to get entrained within the column, so it is surprising. We don't know how common it is because we've not really looked, but it's super interesting from an oceanographic perspective. The conditions of the Taylor Column had to be just right to grab the massive iceberg, Watling said. Generally, Taylor columns are formed when there is a balance of the moving water with the size and shape of the seamount, he explained. If the water is moving too fast relative to the size of the seamount, vortices of spinning water are shed downstream of the seamount. If the water is not moving fast enough, then the water passes around and over the seamount with some small turbulence on the downstream side, he added via email. A giant spinning iceberg is not a concern as long as the spinning iceberg remains entrapped. It will melt more slowly than it would have had it continued on its journey. No matter where the ice melts, it will not contribute to rising sea levels, as the iceberg is already in the water, Burley said. Calving of ice shelves along the Antarctic coastline is also a natural part of Earth's process, and there is nothing to be immediately concerned about with any individual iceberg calving, Burley said. What is of concern particularly around West Antarctica is increasingly thinning ice shelves amid the climate crisis, which can cause more iceberg calving and result in land-based ice melting faster, thus contributing to rising sea levels, he added. I don't think we should be worried about this particular event. But more generally, we should be interested in icebergs, understanding numbers, where they're coming from, and ultimately what that means for the land-based ice that sits behind them, and the stability of that going into the future, Burley said. How long is this spin cycle? While researchers do not know how long the iceberg will continue to spin, Burley pointed to a January 2015 study from British Antarctic Survey researchers that found a profiling float, an oceanographic instrument used for taking surface measurements, had remained in a Taylor column for 4 years. Because the float was about the size of a person and is drastically smaller than the giant iceberg, the researchers do not expect the iceberg to stay in the column as long, Burley said. It's likely that some combination of wind variations, currents, and the exact configuration of the berg relative to the column will move it out. But I think we're sort of surprised that it's been in for as long as it has, so I guess we wait to see, he added. Because of the large size of the seamount, the iceberg could remain spinning for a long time, even years, said Dr. Tony Koslow, a research oceanographer emeritus with the Scripps Institution of Oceanography at the University of California, San Diego. The size of the seamount is critical. Peary is very large, thus its ability to trap the iceberg for years, he said in an email. But the phenomenon itself is nothing to be concerned about, according to Koslow. Seamounts are known for being hot spots for ocean biodiversity, as the currents that flow around the mounds create ideal conditions for invertebrates that attach themselves to the mountain and other fauna that feed on food particles swept around by the currents, Koslow told CNN in previous reporting. The melting of the iceberg could affect these natural conditions, but more research is needed to know for sure, Watling said. I suppose it could cause some reduction of biodiversity in the water column, but may have a small effect on the benthic community's marine organisms that live on the seafloor. This iceberg is large enough to interfere with the additional primary production diatoms, like algae, that is produced as the nutrient-rich water that upwells in the Taylor column feeds the phytoplankton. If that happens, then food supply to the bottom will be diminished, Watling said via email. However, he added, I don't see any reason to be concerned. It sure is neat, though, and demonstrates again what an interesting world we live in. These 100-year-old silhouettes ruled the Venice red carpet. What year is it again? Some of the looks on the red carpet at the 81st Venice Film Festival could suggest the year was 1924, rather than 2024. Since Wednesday, attendees have given elegant nods to old Hollywood glamour, from time-honored dress silhouettes to vintage-inspired accessories. Last night, at the premiere for Pablo Larraín's Maria, a biopic following the tumultuous life of 20th-century soprano Maria Callas, leading Lady Angelina Jolie seemed to channel her on-screen counterpart. Dressed in a nude-toned custom Tamara Ralph gown, Jolie finished off her look with a 1930s-style faux fur shrug, a golden rose-shaped brooch, and a deep red lipstick. While Jolie's piece is a dead ringer for the shrugs worn by the likes of Marlene Dietrich, Joan Crawford, and Greta Garbo, Tamara Ralph's faux reimagining brings the antiquated accessory into the modern day. But Jolie wasn't the only guest at the Maria screening taking cues from the starlets of yore. Taylor Russell floated across the carpet in a pale yellow silk crepon dress with a matching scarf attached to the train. The look, a custom creation from Lau, had a distinct 1930s feel thanks to the artfully draped evening scarf and conjured Marilyn Monroe in the 1953 film Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, where Monroe wears a fiery bejeweled gown elevated by an orange chiffon scarf. Coco Chanel, too, in her spring-summer 1930 collection, topped silk crepe dresses with an extra yard of fabric styled gracefully around the neck. Isabelle Huppert, the festival's jury president, fast-forwarded a couple of decades for her Beetlejuice premiere look. According to British Vogue, the Pope red opera coat was inspired by 1950s theater-goers. Lifted from Balenciaga's 50th couture collection, designed in 2021, Huppert paired the evening gown with white elbow gloves and a stack of Cartier bracelets on each wrist. Chilean actor Mariana de Girolamo similarly resurrected a vintage silhouette for her Venice Film Festival appearance. Her black embellished Chanel cape dress, worn to the screening of El Jockey, was a masterclass in harnessing fashion history, since the house has been designing dramatic evening capes for almost a century. De Girolamo's version was glamorous yet understated, with an outline of sparkle made from embroidered beads and sequins. The lesson is simple and applicable to both fashion and film. Sometimes old is gold. Titanic newspaper article discovered in wardrobe. After 112 years, a newspaper illustrating the agonizing weight facing families of those on board the Titanic has been discovered at the back of a wardrobe in England after more than a century. The aftermath of the tragedy, which saw more than 1,500 people lose their lives when the ship sank in April 1912, is poignantly captured in pictures featured in the 112-year-old newspaper. Dated April 20, 1912, the front page of British newspaper The Daily Mirror shows two women in Southampton, the English port city from where the Titanic set sail, waiting for a list of survivors to be posted. The headline reads, "One of the thousands of tragedies which made the Titanic wreck the most horrible in the world's history, when our MS Titanic set sail on April 10, 1912. She was the largest passenger ship in service and considered to be unsinkable. Just 4 days later, the Titanic's maiden voyage was transformed into an international tragedy when the ship struck an iceberg in the North Atlantic at 11:40 p.m. April 14. The ship, which sank in less than 3 hours, did not have enough lifeboats for the approximately 2,000 to 120 people on board." The newspaper was discovered in a wardrobe during a house clearance carried out by auctioneers Hansons, where it is believed to have been kept for more than a century. The front page reads, "Of the 903 members of the crew of the Titanic, only 210 have been saved." This means tragedy upon tragedy for Southampton, where the majority of the men lived, for by this appalling disaster mothers have been robbed of sons, wives of husbands, and young girls of sweethearts. Yesterday was a terrible day in the history of the town, though it put an end to all suspense. A list of the saved was posted outside the White Star offices, and mothers and wives who had been hoping against hope eagerly read the names, only to find their worst fears were realized. For some, of course, the list contained glorious news, but they hushed their joy in the presence of the terrible grief of their friends and neighbors. Inside, the paper opens up to a double-page spread featuring a gallery of images of those who were on board. Charles Hanson, owner of Hanson's Auctioneers, said in a statement on the firm's website that the newspaper was discovered during a house clearance at a property in the city of Lichfield in Staffordshire. "The paper was found thanks to our elderly client's grandmother," Hanson said. She kept newspapers marking major events such as the coronation of King George V in 1911, as well as the sinking of the Titanic. Hanson described the newspaper, which sold for £34, about $45 this week, as a valuable piece of social history, adding, "This find reminds us of the many bereaved families and friends, heartbroken mothers, fathers, and wives." Tobacco buyers under 30 should expect to show ID under new FDA rule. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration is instituting a rule that will require any retailer that sells tobacco products to check the identification of any tobacco buyers under the age of 30, up from the previous age limit of 27. The agency announced Thursday that its final rule also restricts tobacco vending machine sales to spaces that are limited to people 21 and older. The agency said the main goal of the changes is to make it more difficult for underage people to get access to these products. About 250 children become smokers every day, according to the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids. Studies show that 9 out of 10 adults who smoke daily reported having their first cigarette by age 18. The federal age limit for tobacco purchases was 18 until 2019, when it was raised to 21. The FDA says the other reason for its latest change is because it's often difficult for retailers to tell someone's age just by looking at them. Today's rule is another key step towards protecting our nation's youth from the health risks of tobacco products, said Dr. Brian King, director of the FDA's Center for Tobacco Products. Decades of science has shown that keeping tobacco products away from youth is critical to reducing the number of people who ultimately become addicted to these products and suffer from tobacco-related disease and death. Smoking is the leading cause of preventable death in the country. According to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, even though a 2023 Gallup poll found that the number of people who smoke cigarettes reached record lows. The new restrictions apply to sales of traditional tobacco products, as well as newer ones like e-cigarettes, which are most popular among underage smokers. Although the number of children using e-cigarettes has started to decline over the past 5 years, 1 out of 10 high schoolers report using an e-cigarette in the previous 30 days. For middle schoolers, that number was 1 in 22, according to the CDC. One step toward curbing the number of young tobacco users that the FDA has not undertaken is a ban on menthol and flavored cigar products. Flavors, including menthol, are considered a real attraction for kids who start using tobacco products. The FDA has been looking into menthol and flavored cigar restrictions for more than a decade, but amid intense lobbying from tobacco companies, those restrictions have been waiting for sign-off from the Biden White House for months. The agency says the new ID and vending machine limits will go into effect September 30th. The FDA said it will also continue compliance checks to make sure businesses aren't selling to underage tobacco users. To date, it has done 1.5 million such checks, and these inspections have resulted in 130,000 warning letters, at least 33,000 financial penalties, and more than 200 no tobacco sale orders for stores that have violated age restrictions. 2 meteor showers are set to peak this week. Here's how to see them. Look up at the night sky this week for a chance to see high-speed meteors and bright fireballs from 2 meteor showers set to peak around the same time. The southern Delta Aquarids will be most active Monday night through early Tuesday and could ring in a viewing of up to 25 meteors per hour depending on your location, according to the American Meteor Society. And on Tuesday night, the minor shower Alpha Capricornids, known for its bright fireballs, could also bring 5 meteors per hour to the celestial party. A fireball is defined as a meteor that is brighter than planet Venus and is caused by a larger-size meteor that could exceed 1 meter, more than 3 feet, in diameter. According to NASA, meteor showers are the debris left by comets and asteroids orbiting the Sun that Earth encounters annually at some point during its orbital path. The debris trail for the southern Delta Aquarids is spread out, so the shower could produce around the same rates of meteors for a few days surrounding its peak, said Robert Lunsford, the Fireball Report Coordinator for the American Meteor Society. Wednesday night is the best time to view both showers, Lunsford said, as the moon wanes and loses about 8% illumination each night. The moon's illumination can hinder the visibility of the fainter meteors. On Monday, the moon will be about 34% full, and on Wednesday, the orb will be 16% full, according to NASA's Daily Moon Guide, How to Spot a Meteor to View Meteor Showers. It is best to look with your eyes only and not use any equipment, such as binoculars or a telescope, as you'll want a clear view of the entire sky, said Andrew Rivkin, a planetary astronomer and research scientist with the Applied Physics Laboratory at the Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. Find yourself someplace dark, away from city lights, if you can, with a view of the open sky and settle in, Rivkin said. He recommends sitting outside for at least 10 to 15 minutes to let your eyes adjust to the dark. The best time to see meteors will be at around 4 a.m. local time, when the radiant, the constellation from which meteor showers appear to originate, will be the highest in the sky, Lunsford said. Both meteor showers will be visible across the world, although the northern hemisphere may see lower rates of meteors per hour, only up to 10, because the radiant will be lower in the sky, he added. Constellation Aquarius is the radiant for the southern Delta Aquarids, and constellation Capricornus is the radiant for the Alpha Capricornids. Both constellations will be next to one another in the southwest part of the sky, Lunsford said. Even though they're right next to each other, you can tell them apart because the Alpha Capricornids are so much slower, he said. The southern Delta Aquarids are about 40 kilometers 25 miles per second, according to NASA, and typically last for half a second. However, the Alpha Capricornids are usually bigger and are more likely to last at least a second long, Lunsford added. They are not as strong as the southern Delta Aquarids, maybe 5 an hour at the best, but they're well known for producing fireballs. So you may see in an hour for fairly faint ones, and then a nice, bright one that'll last a few seconds, while the Perseid meteor shower is still a few weeks out from its peak during the evening of August 11th. It has also been active in the night sky since mid-July and can be seen alongside these other showers, Lunsford said. You may only see a couple an hour, but they tend to be bright and really fast, he said. So if you're starting to doze off, they'll really wake you up. Earlier in July, a fireball streaked across the sky in broad daylight over parts of New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and other states in the U.S. Northeast, sparking excitement across the East Coast. Some meteor enthusiasts captured the rare spectacle on camera. It is a situation where the universe is coming to us. It's interacting with us in a way that maybe we don't usually think about, Rivkin said. We see the sun every day, and we see the moon. Those are up there, kind of constant. The stars are constant, but meteors are things that are not typically there. You might be the only one to ever see a particular meteor. I think that makes them particularly special. Two men indicted for allegedly damaging ancient rock formations at Lake Mead to Henderson, Nevada. Men have been indicted and are set to face trial for allegedly damaging ancient rock formations at Lake Mead. Peyton David Guy Cosper and Wyatt Clifford Fain were arraigned on Friday, and both men pleaded not guilty to one count of injury and depredation of government property. According to allegations in the indictment and a statement from the U.S. Attorney's Office, on April 7, 2024, the men pushed chunks of ancient rock formations over the edge of a cliff near the Redstone Dunes Trail at the Lake Mead National Recreation Area, causing damage in excess of $1,000. There were no signs posted at the entrance prohibiting pushing rocks or that it was a federally protected site, said Ross Goodman, an attorney representing Cosper. Mr. Cosper did not have any knowledge that pushing a boulder was unlawful until the U.S. Marshal showed up at his house for months later. Goodman said in a statement to CNN. Brian Pugh, the attorney representing Fain, said, "The justice system presumes that all accused of a crime are presumed innocent unless proven otherwise in a court of law." This applies to Mr. Fain. A jury trial is set for October 8, 2024. The defendants could each face up to 10 years in prison if convicted, according to a release from the U.S. Attorney's Office, District of Nevada. The National Park Service investigated the case, according to the U.S. Attorney's Office. The men were arrested by the United States Marshals Service. Park rangers sought the public's help in April in identifying the suspects in the incident, which was captured on video. Damage to the federally protected formations, which were shaped over time out of 140-million-year-old sand dunes, is irreversible. Recreation Area spokesperson John Haynes called the destruction appalling. "Why on earth would you do this to this area that's so beautiful? It's one of my favorite places in the park, and they're up there just destroying it. I don't understand that," Haynes told CNN affiliate KVVU in April. The vast recreation area covers 1.5 million acres of breathtaking mountain views, canyon trails, and 2 vital reservoirs that extend across the Nevada and Arizona border. Water sports at the Lake Mead Reservoir are a major draw for the park's 6 million annual visitors, but extreme drought in the west has caused the lake's water levels to plummet in recent years, exposing sunken boats and several sets of human remains. Trump's businesses are raking in millions of dollars from Republican political campaigns, including his own late last year. Former President Donald Trump announced his endorsement of car dealership owner Bernie Moreno for Ohio Senate seat, elevating an untested candidate who'd never held public office over several other more prominent Republicans. 2 days later, Marino's campaign spent about $17,000 at Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort and then followed up by spending an additional $79,000 the next month, making him one of the Florida club's top political spenders. He wasn't alone. With glitzy Mar-a-Lago fundraisers, stays at Trump's hotels, and flights on the former president's private jet, Republican candidates and political groups are on track to spend more on Trump's businesses this year than any year since 2016, according to a CNN analysis of federal campaign finance data. Trump himself has been the biggest spender, both this year and over the last decade. Between his 3 presidential campaigns, Trump and associated political groups have funneled more than $28 million in campaign donations to his businesses, helping convert the enthusiasm of his political supporters into personal profit. Other Republicans have followed suit, spending millions at Trump's properties in an apparent attempt to curry favor with the former president and signal their allegiance to him to GOP voters. Some of the candidates who spent the most money on Trump businesses in recent years have been new politicians who won the former president's endorsement despite a lack of past electoral experience or success, including Marino, former Georgia Senate candidate Herschel Walker, and Arizona Senate hopeful Kari Lake in the first half of 2024. Federal campaigns and PACs have spent nearly $3.2 million on Trump businesses, more than 80% of which came from Trump's own campaign and associated groups. The biggest chunk, about $1.9 million, was spent by Trump's campaign and fundraising committees on a Trump-owned company that operates his jet. In total, campaigns and committees have spent more than $1 million at Mar-a-Lago so far this year, and about $200,000 at other Trump hotels and resorts. Caroline Leavitt, a spokesperson for Trump's campaign, said that committees are paying the fair market rate for all venues and services provided by Trump businesses. The dynamic of candidates shelling out thousands on Trump's businesses while vying for his endorsement, which can make or break Republican campaigns, is an example of how politics has boosted his business's bottom line. And the former president's influence helps explain why some candidates are traveling hundreds or thousands of miles to show up at a Trump hotel or resort, campaign finance experts said. He's clearly now in complete control of the Republican Party, said Daniel Weiner, director of the Brennan Center's Elections and Government Program. Patronizing his businesses has become one of the accepted ways that candidates and public officials express their loyalty to the party's leader. NBC Spending Big CNN analyzed Federal Election Commission data on more than 12 million campaign expenditures since 2011 and identified those that went to a variety of Trump-associated businesses, including Mar-a-Lago, his hotels and resorts, and the company tied to his jet. About 150 congressional candidates have reported spending campaign funds at Trump businesses, including some Democrats in the years before his first presidential bid. New Jersey Sen. Robert Menendez's campaign spent several $1,000s at the Trump National Golf Club in Virginia in 2012, and the campaign of Delaware Sen. Chris Coons, a close ally of President Joe Biden, spent about $700 at the Trump International Resort in Florida in 2014, but since Trump famously descended his golden escalator in 2015. Every congressional candidate whose campaign has reported spending money at his businesses has been a Republican, the FEC data shows. Most of them have received an endorsement from Trump at some point in their political careers. And some of the biggest spenders are politicians who have never held elected office but received key early endorsements from the former president that helped their campaigns win or avoid competitive primaries. Marino, the Ohio Senate candidate, is a clear example. A businessman who owns a host of car dealerships in the Cleveland area, Marino originally ran for Senate in 2022, before dropping out after a conversation with Trump and eventually supporting now vice presidential nominee J.D. Vance in April 2023, as Marino prepared to run for the Senate again. He reported to payments at Mar-a-Lago totaling about $13,000 for event catering, the same day one of those payments was made. Trump posted on Truth Social that he had heard Marino, who he called a highly respected businessman, was thinking of running for the Senate and that he would not be easy to be beat. Marino posted a screenshot of the missive on Twitter with a "Thank you, sir," and announced his campaign days later. Trump endorsed Marino on December 19th. On December 21st, Marino reported spending nearly $17,000 more at Mar-a-Lago. He spent another $80,000 there in January when his campaign held a fundraiser at the resort that raised about $350,000 in donations. At the event, Kimberly Guilfoyle, the fiancée of Trump's son Donald Trump Jr., declared that God has chosen Marino and called him an unbelievable patriot who has achieved so much, social media video shows. Marino won a competitive primary election in March, defeating the sitting Republican Secretary of State and a state legislator. Before the Trump endorsement, it was a close race, said David B. Cohen, a professor of political science at the University of Akron. The Trump endorsement meant everything, Cohen said. It was the whole ball game. Now, Marino is the GOP nominee in one of the nation's closest Senate races. Reagan McCarthy, a Marino spokesperson, said in an email that Mar-a-Lago is a beautiful property and we held two of our most successful fundraisers of the cycle there. The congressional candidate whose campaign spent the most at Trump businesses over the last decade is Herschel Walker, the former football star who lost a close race for a Georgia Senate seat in 2022. Walker's campaign spent a total of nearly $215,000 at Mar-a-Lago, Trump's West Palm Beach Golf Club, and his Las Vegas hotel. An early endorsement from Trump helped Walker, who had never before run for office, coast to victory in the GOP primary. But his campaign was plagued by scandals, including allegations of domestic abuse, as well as claims that Walker had paid for abortions for previous girlfriends, which he denied. Scott Paradise, Walker's campaign manager, said in an email that events his team held at Trump properties raised more than $1 million and were by far our two biggest fundraisers of the entire campaign. It was a great return on investment, he said. More recently, one of Mar-a-Lago's top political spenders has been Arizona Senate candidate Kari Lake, whose campaign dropped more than $100,000 there so far this year. Most of that spending came in April, when Lake held a fundraiser at the resort that raised $1 million, according to Axios. While Lake's campaign reported spending about $71,000 at Mar-a-Lago for facility rental, catering services. It also reported $32,000 for lodging at the resort on the day of the fundraiser and the 2 days after, suggesting that the campaign shelled out tens of thousands of dollars so Lake or her staffers could stay at Trump's resort. Arizona campaign finance data shows that during her 2020 race for governor, Lake's campaign spent an additional $118,000 at Mar-a-Lago, making her one of the top political spenders that year as well. Late last month, Lake won her Senate primary with about 55% of the vote after scoring Trump's endorsement, which came despite concerns among some Republicans that her election denial rhetoric could alienate swing voters in another of this year's marquee Senate races. But her frequent appearances at Mar-a-Lago didn't necessarily endear her to Trump. The Washington Post reported that Trump was annoyed that Lake was showing up at his Florida resort too often and encouraged her to get back to the campaign trail across the country in Arizona. A Lake campaign spokesperson did not respond to requests for comment. Several of the other federal candidates who spent the most at Mar-a-Lago over the last decade were right-wing congressional hopefuls who won Trump's endorsement but lost at the ballot box in 2022. J.R. Majewski of Ohio, John Gibbs of Michigan, and Vernon Jones of Georgia. There's no evidence that Trump is specifically choosing to endorse candidates because they're spending money at his businesses. But some experts say the overlap between Mar-a-Lago money and Trump backing should raise eyebrows. It's problematic if he's giving endorsements because of people spending money at his properties, said Kathleen Clark, a government ethics expert and law professor at Washington University in St. Louis. We don't know whether he's doing that because he has an agreement, an explicit quid pro quo, or he's just been influenced to give an endorsement because of their spending money. Levitt, the Trump spokesperson, said that any allegations of quid pro quo related to political spending at Trump businesses are false and politically motivated to bolster an old and tired narrative, politics boosting Trump's bottom line still. The biggest political spender at Trump businesses is the same guy whose name is on the gold-plated signs. Since his first bid for president, Trump's principal campaign committee and associated PACs and super PACs have spent more than $28 million on his businesses. But while political spending at Mar-a-Lago has attracted the most attention, the bulk of Trump's campaign payments to his own businesses has gone to a lower-profile firm. His campaign and associated committees have spent more than $14 million on air travel from TAG Air, Inc., which operates Trump's Boeing 757 jet, nicknamed Trump Force One, and other aircraft. Trump's latest financial disclosure statement, which was released last week, showed that he owns TAG Air through another LLC and a trust. The company is listed as being worth between $5 million and $25 million, and Trump reported earning $4.4 million in income from it. He also reported earning $56.9 million from Mar-a-Lago. So far, about 5% of the total disbursements from Trump's 2024 campaign committee have gone to his own businesses. That's a larger percentage than for his 2016 or 2020 campaign committees, although that may be in part because overall campaign spending will ramp up ahead of the election. It's not illegal for candidates to spend campaign funds at their own businesses, provided that the businesses are charging them a fair market rate, said Weiner, the Brennan Center expert. But he noted that donors may not realize some of their contributions are indirectly going into Trump's pockets. They want to help his ticket win, and they want to express their support, Weiner said. To the extent that a campaign is used in part to prop up his businesses, that's a concern. Beyond PACs associated with Trump's campaign, some other GOP groups are spending less than they were in past election cycles. The Republican National Committee spent a total of more than $2 million at Trump hotels and resorts between 2016 and 2022, but it didn't report any spending in 2023. And only a single $115.54 payment to Trump hotels so far this year, despite concerns among some that Lara Trump could try to direct money to her father-in-law's companies after her elevation to RNC co-chair in March. Similarly, the Senate Leadership Fund and the National Republican Congressional Committee spent tens of thousands of dollars at Trump properties in past election cycles, but haven't reported any spending there since 2020. The campaign spending at Mar-a-Lago and other Trump properties parallels other business ventures Trump has been involved in since he left the White House to earn money from his political supporters, including selling digital trading cards, promoting Trump-branded sneakers, and hawking a $59.99 Bible. Meanwhile, the growing mix of politics and business has turned off some longtime patrons of Trump resorts who aren't MAGA devotees. Mar-a-Lago, a century-old resort in one of Florida's tonest areas, was once one of the first private clubs in the area to welcome Black or Jewish members. Between the gorgeous scenery and more diverse clientele, it was a great place for a party, remembered Lawrence Leamer, who wrote a book on Trump's ties to the club. But as Trump transformed American politics over the last decade, Mar-a-Lago has also dramatically changed, Leamer said, with classy society dinners and balls increasingly replaced by fundraisers and events catering to conservatives. People are there because they want to get his ear, Leamer said. It's just not fun anymore, it's political. Trump spreads false conspiracy theory about Harris Detroit crowd size. Donald Trump falsely claimed in a series of social media posts Sunday that nobody attended Vice President Kamala Harris' Michigan rally last week and said his Democratic rival should be disqualified over a fake crowd picture. The former president appeared to have fallen for a far-right conspiracy theory, one easily disproved by photos and videos captured by attendees and media showing thousands of supporters at the event at an airport hangar near Detroit. The false claims about attendance at Harris' event come as Trump navigates the contours of a changed presidential race, with the vice president riding a wave of new Democratic enthusiasm after replacing President Joe Biden atop the ticket. The GOP nominee, who regularly draws large crowds of his own, has long been fixated on audience size, with his speeches often filled with exaggerated boasts about the turnout. Trump, on his social media website Truth Social, made the fabricated claim that Harris had been turned in by an airport maintenance worker who noticed the fake crowd picture. He then said Harris should be disqualified from the 2024 election because the creation of a fake image is election interference. Anyone who does that will cheat at anything. However, photos and videos of the event, including videos captured with CNN's cameras, reflect a sizable audience for Harris' Wednesday event. The crowd filled a large hangar and spilled onto the sprawling tarmac where Air Force had stopped. Two large risers and many rows of chairs were outside, as were several giant screens for the outdoor crowd that couldn't see the rally stage. Haney Farid, a digital forensics expert and professor at the University of California, Barkley said on LinkedIn that he analyzed the photo with two models designed to detect patterns associated with AI-generated images. Both models found no evidence of AI generation, he said, adding that the text on the signs and plane showed none of the usual signs of generative AI, while the lack of evidence of manipulation is not evidence the image is real. He said, "We find no evidence that this image is AI-generated or digitally altered." David Plouffe, a Harris campaign senior advisor, wrote on X, "These are not conspiratorial rantings from the deepest recesses of the internet. The author could have the nuclear codes and be responsible for decisions that will affect us all for decades." Trump on Sunday shared a screenshot of an X post that featured two photos, one shared on X by a Harris staffer that showed thousands of people greeting Harris' plane. Another zoomed in on the curved, reflective side of one of Air Force Two's engines in which the crowd isn't clear. Has anyone noticed that Kamala cheated at the airport? There was nobody at the plane, and she AI'd it, and showed a massive crowd of so-called followers, but they didn't exist, Trump wrote on Truth Social. She was turned in by a maintenance worker at the airport when he noticed the fake crowd picture, but there was nobody there. Later confirmed by the reflection of the mirror-like finish on the vice presidential plane, she's a cheater, she had nobody waiting, and the crowd looked like 10,000 people. Same thing is happening with her fake crowds at her speeches, Trump added. She should be disqualified because the creation of a fake image is election interference. Anyone who does that will cheat at anything. Trump has twice been indicted over alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election. He falsely claimed in another post, "Look, we caught her with a fake crowd. There was nobody there." In reaction to Trump's false claims, rally attendees and Harris staffers were sharing their own photos from the event on social media Sunday afternoon. Lavora Barnes, chairwoman of the Michigan Democratic Party, shared on X a photo from the event, showing her speaking to a large crowd before Harris was introduced. Barnes joked that she was honored that whoever made the AI image of 15,000 excited Democrats welcoming Harris and running mate Tim Walz to Detroit was kind enough to include me at the lectern. That AI crowd was really loud. My ears just stopped ringing from their imaginary cheering, Barnes said. Fact check. Trump made at least 20 false claims in his conversation with Elon Musk. Former President Donald Trump delivered his usual bombardment of false claims, at least 20 in all, during a Monday conversation with billionaire supporter Elon Musk, which aired on Musk's social media platform, X. Most of the falsehoods uttered by the Republican presidential nominee were claims that have been repeatedly debunked before, some of them for years. They spanned a broad range of subjects, from immigration to the economy to foreign policy to Trump's record in office to Vice President Kamala Harris, his Democratic opponent. Trump claimed, "Our crime rate's going through the roof." Facts first, Trump's claim is false. Both violent crime and property crime dropped significantly in 2023 and in the first quarter of 2024. There are limitations to the FBI published data from local law enforcement. The numbers are preliminary. Not all communities submitted data, and the submitted data usually has some errors, so these statistics may not precisely capture the size of the recent declines in crime. But other data sources make it clear crime has indeed declined to some extent. The preliminary FBI data for 2023 showed a roughly 13% decline in murder and a roughly 6% decline in overall violent crime compared to 2022, bringing both murder and violent crime levels below where they were in Trump's last calendar year in office in 2020. The preliminary FBI data for the first quarter of 2024 showed an even steeper drop from the same quarter in 2023, a roughly 26% decline in murder and roughly 15% decline in overall violent crime. Crime data expert Jeff Asher, co-founder of the firm Datalytics, said earlier this year that if the final 2023 figures show a decline in murder of at least 10% from 2022, this would be the fastest U.S. decline ever recorded. And he noted that both the preliminary FBI published data from the first quarter of 2024 and also crime data collected from several independent sources point to an even larger decline in property and violent crime, including a substantially larger drop in murder so far this year compared to 2023, though there is still time left in the year for those trends to change, after Trump claimed in June that crime is so much up. Anna Harvey, a political science professor and director of the Public Safety Lab at New York University, noted to CNN that the claim is contradicted both by the data from the FBI and from the Major Cities Chiefs Association, which represents 70 large U.S. police forces. She said, "It would be more accurate to say that crime is so much down. Inflation," Trump said. "I think we have the worst inflation we've had in 100 years. They say it's 48 years. I don't believe it. Facts first." Trump framed this as an opinion, but it's baseless nonetheless, wrong in two different ways. First, even when the inflation rate hit its Biden-era peak of 9.1% in June 2022, that 9.1% rate was the highest since 1981, between 40 and 41 years prior. Certainly not 100 years, and not even 48 years. Second, inflation has declined sharply since the June 2022 peak. And the most recent available rate at the time he spoke, for July 2024, was 3.2%, a rate that, the Biden presidency aside, was exceeded as recently as 2011. Global warming and sea levels. Trump argued that the threat of the nuclear war is far more important than the threat posed by climate change. And he said, the biggest threat, it's not global warming, where the ocean's gonna rise 1/8 of an inch over the next 400 years. And you'll have more oceanfront property, right? Facts first, Trump's claim about the pace of sea level rise is wildly inaccurate. The global average sea level is currently rising more per year than Trump claimed that it will rise in 400 years. NASA reported in March that the current global average sea level rise in 2023 was 0.17 inches per year, more than double the rate in 1993. And a World Meteorological Organization report this year said the rate of sea level rise between 2014 and 2023 was about 0.19 inches per year. In other words, sea level rise is already more than 1/8 of an inch annually, and it is accelerating. NASA found a jump of 0.3 inches between 2022 and 2023. Gary Griggs, a University of California, Santa Cruz professor of Earth and Planetary Sciences who studies sea level rise, said last year that Trump's similar claims can only be described as totally out of touch with reality, and that Trump has no idea what he is talking about. Sea levels rise by different amounts in different locations. For the U.S., sea levels are expected to rise particularly fast for the East Coast and Gulf of Mexico coast, and Trump's state of Florida, which is bordered by both of those coasts, is expected to be affected more severely than many other coastal states. In fact, Trump's claims about sea levels are highly inaccurate for the area near Mar-a-Lago, which is on the Atlantic. Griggs noted in a June email that data from the closest National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration tide gauge to Mar-a-Lago shows an increase of 1/8 of an inch roughly every 9 months. Trump has also previously made the joke about rising seas creating more oceanfront property. In reality, rising sea levels are expected to have devastating consequences not only for many seafront properties but for areas further inland, rendering some communities uninhabitable and others more dangerous, increasing the frequency and reach of flooding, making hurricanes more destructive and damaging infrastructure and ecosystems. The number of people listening to the conversation. Trump told Musk that you got a lot of people listening to the conversation, like 60 million or something. He then asked somebody what the number was, but he never corrected his initial estimate. Facts first, Trump did express uncertainty about the number, but his like 60 million or something claim is false. At the time he made this remark, public data on X showed that there were 1.1 million accounts listening to the conversation. Trump appeared to be referring to something different, the number of views on his own X post, sharing the space where the conversation was played. But the vast majority of the accounts that viewed the post did not actually listen to the conversation. Harris and prisoners. Trump claimed of Harris, she wants to release all the prisoners that are in detention, and some of these guys are really bad. That just came out today. Facts first, this is false. There is no basis for the claim that Harris wants to release all the prisoners that are in detention. Trump appeared to be referring to news stories in conservative media that reported that Harris had said in 2019, while unsuccessfully running in the Democratic presidential primary, that she wanted to close privately run immigration detention centers. Even if Harris continues to hold this position today, she has not addressed the subject since she began her presidential campaign in July. Closing privately run immigration detention centers would not result in the release of all prisoners in immigration detention, let alone all prisoners in regular U.S. jails and prisons. Trump did not specify that he was talking about Harris' past stance on certain immigration detention facilities rather than all prisons. It's possible Trump had been misled himself. A short clip shared by some Republicans on social media this week did not include the part of Harris' 2019 remarks where she specified that she was referring to privately run immigration detention facilities in particular. But articles by Fox News and the New York Post correctly noted that this was what she said: Harris' immigration role. Trump claimed of Harris, she was the border czar, and people can't allow them to get away with their disinformation campaign. Now, she's saying she wasn't really involved. She was totally in charge. Facts first, this is false. Harris was never made Biden's border czar, a label the White House has always emphasized is inaccurate, and was never totally in charge of the border. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas is the official in charge of border security. In reality, Biden gave Harris a more limited immigration-related assignment in 2021, asking her to lead diplomacy with El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras in an attempt to address the conditions that prompted their citizens to try to migrate to the United States. Some Republicans have scoffed at assertions that Harris was never the border czar, noting on social media that news articles sometimes described Harris as such, but those articles were wrong. Various news outlets, including CNN, reported as early as the first half of 2021 that the White House emphasized that Harris had not been put in charge of border security as a whole, as border czar strongly suggests, and had instead been handed a diplomatic task related to Central American countries. A White House fact sheet in July 2021 said, on February 2, 2021, President Biden signed an executive order that called for the development of a root causes strategy. Since March, Vice President Kamala Harris has been leading the administration's diplomatic efforts to address the root causes of migration from El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. Biden's own comments at a March 2021 event announcing the assignment were slightly more muddled, but he said he had asked Harris to lead our diplomatic effort to address factors causing migration in the 3 Northern Triangle countries. He also mentioned Mexico that day. Biden listed factors in these countries he thought had led to migration and said that if you deal with the problems in country, it benefits everyone. And Harris' comments that day were focused squarely on root causes. Republicans can fairly say that even root causes work is a border-related task. But calling her border czar goes too far. Venezuela, crime and migration. Trump claimed Venezuela, their crime is down 72%. They're taking their drug dealers, frankly, they're prisoners, they're emptying out their prisons. They're taking their criminals, their murderers, their rapists, and they're delivering them. Facts first, Trump greatly overstated the Biden-era decline in crime in Venezuela, at least according to the limited statistics that are publicly available. And while it is certain that at least some criminals have joined law-abiding Venezuelans in a mass exodus from the country amid the economic crisis of the last decade, there is no proof Venezuela has deliberately emptied prisons for migration purposes or intentionally sent ex-prisoners to the United States. Right-wing website Breitbart published a vague 2022 article about a supposed federal intelligence report warning Border Patrol agents about freed violent prisoners from Venezuela, who had then joined migrant caravans. But this supposed claim about Venezuela's actions has never been corroborated. Experts have told CNN, PolitiFact and FactCheck.org that they know of no proof of any such thing having happened. We have no evidence that the Venezuelan government is emptying its prisons or mental health institutions to send them outside the country. In other words, to the U.S. or any other country. Roberto Briceño León, founder and director of the Venezuelan Observatory of Violence, an independent organization that tracks violence in the country, saw it in an email to CNN in June. Venezuela's government does not publish reliable, official crime statistics, so it's hard to get a complete picture. But Briceño León's group publishes annual data on violent deaths, which includes homicides, police killings, and deaths still under investigation. It found a decline of roughly 26% in the number of violent deaths from 2021 to 2023. That's substantial. But not 72%. Briceño León noted in his email that you could find a decline of roughly 70% by 2023. If you compared 2018 to 2023, but Trump was US president until early 2021, and crime trends in any country always have a complex mix of causes. Venezuela is no exception. Brichego Leon argued that, while migration has been a factor in the decline, crime has dropped in large part because the economic crisis has reduced opportunities for crime. Bank robberies disappear because there is no money to rob. Kidnappings decrease because there is no cash to pay the ransoms. Robberies on public transportation stop because travelers have no money in their pockets and old cell phones with no value, he said. Migration numbers. While talking about illegal immigration, Trump claimed that, under President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, you have millions of people coming in a month. Facts first, this is false. There has not been any month under the Biden-Harris administration where even close to millions of people entered the country illegally. In the peak month during this administration for what the government calls border encounters, December 2023, there were 370,890 encounters nationwide. Even if you factor in so-called gotaways, people who evaded the Border Patrol to sneak into the country, there is no basis for the claim that millions of people are entering in a single month. The number of nationwide encounters was 205,019 in June, the last month for which data is currently available to the public. Migration numbers, Part 2. Trump said of migration under Biden and Harris, "I believe it's over 20 million people came into our country, many coming from jails, from prisons, from mental institutions. Or a bigger version of that is insane asylums." Facts first, Trump's 20 million figure is false, a major exaggeration. The total number of encounters nationwide from February 2021 through June 2024, at both legal ports of entry and in between those ports, was about 10 million, and an encounter does not mean a person was let into the country. Some people encountered are promptly sent away. In addition, there is no basis for Trump's claim that many of these migrants have come in from jails, prisons, or mental health facilities. Even if you added the estimated number of Biden-era gotaways, people who evaded the Border Patrol to enter illegally, which House Republicans said in May was nearly 2 million, the totals would still be vastly smaller than 15, 16, or 18 million. Michelle Mittelstadt, spokesperson for the Migration Policy Institute think tank, said in late June after Trump used those figures. The encounters figures can't be described as figures on people successfully entering the U.S. Some encounters involve people who are deemed inadmissible at legal ports and are refused permission to enter. Also, the same person can be encountered multiple times if they keep returning to the border to try again, which is what happened in many cases under Biden when the Title 42 rapid expulsion authority invoked by Trump during the COVID-19 pandemic was in place into May 2023. In 2023, Trump campaign spokesman Stephen Chung cited one source for Trump's claim about prisons being emptied for migration purposes, the Breitbart article that has not been corroborated. Even if Venezuela in particular had indeed freed prisoners to allow people to try to migrate to the U.S., that would be insufficient proof for Trump's claim that some substantial number of Biden-era migrants are from prisons. Migration and the Congo. Trump repeated a claim he has made before about the Congo and migration, again without specifying whether he was referring to the Democratic Republic of Congo or the neighboring Republic of Congo. He said, "From Africa, from the Congo they're coming, from the Congo. And 22 people came in from the Congo recently, and they're murderers, and they drop them. They take him out of jails, which is very expensive, to maintain the jails. They don't do too much maintaining, I can tell you. But they take him out of jails, prisons, they take him out, and they bring them to the United States." Facts first, Trump's claim is baseless. Experts on the Democratic Republic of Congo and the Republic of Congo, plus both pro-immigration and anti-immigration organizations in the U.S., told CNN in March, after Trump made a similar claim, that they had not seen any evidence of Congolese prisons being emptied, let alone evidence of either country somehow having brought ex-prisoners into the U.S. Trump's presidential campaign and an allied super PAC did not respond to requests to provide any evidence. A CNN search of 2 media databases turned up no evidence. Everything he is saying isn't true. Democratic Republic of Congo spokesperson Patrick Muyaya Katembo told CNN in a text message in March. Asked specifically about Trump's claims about Congolese prisons being emptied of violent criminals, he said, "Never ever, it's not true. And," he said, "we want him to stop telling these stories, since it's very bad for the country." Serge Mambouli, the Republic of Congo's ambassador to the U.S., said in an email to CNN in March, "There is no truth or any sign or a single fact supporting such a claim or statement. There were also some Congolese migrants apprehended at the U.S. border under Trump. You can read a more detailed fact check here." Deportations to Central America. Trump repeated a story he has told on numerous previous occasions about how, during President Barack Obama's administration, it was impossible to deport violent criminals to Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. In the case of Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, some others, you couldn't get him back. Under Obama, you couldn't get him back, he said. He repeated, they wouldn't take him back for Obama. Facts first, this claim remains false. In 2016, Obama's last calendar year in office, none of these three countries were on the list of countries that Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, considered recalcitrant, uncooperative in accepting the return of their citizens from the U.S. The Migration Policy Institute, a Washington think tank, noted to CNN in 2019 that in the 2016 fiscal year, ICE reported that Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador ranked second, third, and fourth for the country of citizenship of people being removed from the U.S. The same was true in the 2017 fiscal year, which encompassed the end of Obama's presidency and the beginning of Trump's. ICE did not identify any widespread problems with deportations to these countries. ICE officials said there were some exceptions to the three countries' general cooperativeness, but Trump's general declaration that the countries were uncooperative was never true. The legitimacy of the 2020 election. Trump repeated his usual lie about the legitimacy of the 2020 election, saying his opponents have attempted to persecute him through the courts even though he did nothing wrong and merely complained about a rigged election. Facts first, Trump's claim about the election remains false. The 2020 election was not rigged. Trump lost fair and square to Biden by an electoral college margin of 306 to 232. His opponents did not cheat, and there is no evidence of any fraud, even close to widespread enough to have changed the outcome in any state. We'll leave aside Trump's subjective claims about his legal cases, Europe, and aid to Ukraine. Trump again claimed that European countries are not pulling their weight with regard to aid to Ukraine. He said, with Ukraine, so we're in for $250 billion, and they're in for about $71 billion. Facts first, Trump's claim is false. Through June, European countries had committed and provided more aid to Ukraine than the U.S. had during and just before the Russian invasion began in early 2022, according to data from the Kiel Institute for the World Economy think tank in Germany. The Kiel Institute, which closely tracks aid to Ukraine, found that, from late January 2022, just before Russia's invasion in February 2022, through June 2024, the European Union and individual European countries had committed a total of about $205 billion to Ukraine in military, financial, and humanitarian assistance, compared to about $108 billion committed by the U.S. Europe also exceeded the U.S. in aid that had actually been allocated to Ukraine, defined by the Institute as aid either delivered or specified for delivery, at about $121 billion for Europe compared to about $82 billion for the U.S. The U.S. led Europe on military aid that had actually been allocated, but very narrowly, about $56.42 billion to $56.35 billion. It's important to note that it's possible to come up with different totals using different methodology. But Trump's claim that the U.S. has committed or provided far more aid than Europe is not true regardless. Trade with Europe. Trump claimed, if you build a car in the United States, you can't sell it in Europe, you just can't sell it. It's impossible. Facts first, it's not true that it's impossible to sell a U.S.-made car in Europe. According to a December 2023 report from the European Automobile Manufacturers Association, the EU is the second largest market for U.S. vehicle exports, importing to 171,476 U.S. vehicles in 2022, valued at nearly €9 billion. Some of these are vehicles made by European automakers at plants in the U.S. The EU's Eurostat statistical office says that car imports from the U.S. hit a new peak in 2020. Trump's last full year in office had a value of about €11 billion. Iran and funding for terror groups. Touting his record in dealing with Iran, Trump claimed they had no money for Hamas, they had no money for Hezbollah, they had no money for any of these instruments of terror. Facts first. Trump's claim that Iran had no money for terror groups during his presidency is false. Iran's funding for these groups did decline in the second half of his administration, in large part because his sanctions on Iran had a major negative impact on the Iranian economy, but the funding never stopped entirely, as four experts told CNN in June. Trump's own administration said in 2020 that Iran was continuing to fund terror groups, including Hezbollah. The Trump administration began imposing sanctions on Iran in late 2018, pursuing a campaign known as Maximum Pressure, but Trump-appointed Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said himself in 2020 that Iran was continuing to fund terror groups. So you continue to have, in spite of the Iranian leadership demanding that more money be given to them. They are using the resources that they have to continue funding Hezbollah in Lebanon and threatening the State of Israel, funding Iraqi terrorist Shia groups. All the things that they have done historically, continuing to build out their capabilities even while the people inside of their own country are suffering, Pompeo said in a May 2020 interview, according to a transcript posted on the State Department's website. Trump could have fairly said that his sanctions on Iran had made life more difficult for terror groups, though it's unclear how much their operations were affected. Instead, he continued his years-old practice of exaggerating even legitimate achievements. You can read a more detailed fact-check from June here. China's purchases of Iranian oil. Trump repeated his familiar claim that he successfully pressured China into no longer buying oil from Iran. Iran was broke because I told China, if you buy from Iran. Oil, it's all about the oil, that's where the money is. If you buy oil from Iran, you're not going to do any business with the United States. And I meant it, and they said, we'll pass, and they didn't buy oil. Facts first, Trump's claim is false. China's oil imports from Iran did briefly plummet under Trump in 2019, the year the Trump administration made a concerted effort to deter such purchases, but they never stopped, and then they rose sharply again while Trump was still president. The claim is untrue because Chinese crude imports from Iran haven't stopped at all. Matt Smith, lead oil analyst for the Americas at CLR, a market intelligence firm, said in November when Trump made a similar claim. China's official statistics recorded no purchases of Iranian crude in Trump's last partial month in office, January 2021, and also none in most of Biden's first year in office. But that doesn't mean China's imports actually ceased. Industry experts say it is widely known that China has used a variety of tactics to mask its continued imports from Iran. Smith said Iranian crude is often listed in Chinese data as being from Malaysia. Ships may travel from Iran with their transponders switched off and then turn them on when they are near Malaysia, Smith said, or transfer the Iranian oil to other ships. Ali Vaez, Iran project director at the International Crisis Group, said in a November email, China significantly reduced its imports from Iran from around 800,000 barrels per day in 2018 to 100,000 in late 2019, but by the time Trump left office, they were back to upwards to 700,000 barrels. Trump's tax cuts. Trump repeated his regular claim that his signature tax cuts in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 were the largest tax cut ever provided. Facts first, Trump is wrong. Analysts have found that his tax cut law was not the largest in history, either in percentage of gross domestic product or in inflation-adjusted dollars. The act made numerous permanent and temporary changes to the tax code, including reducing both corporate and individual income tax rates. In a report released earlier this year, the federal government's Congressional Budget Office looked at the size of past tax cuts enacted between 1981 and 2023. It found that two other tax cut bills were bigger: former President Ronald Reagan's 1981 package and legislation signed by former President Barack Obama that extended earlier tax cuts enacted during former President George W. Bush's administration. The CBO measured the sizes of tax cuts by looking at the revenue effects of the bills as a percentage of gross domestic product. In other words, how much federal revenue a bill cut as a portion of the economy over 5 years. Reagan's 1981 tax cut and Obama's 2012 tax cut extension were 3.5% and 1.7% of GDP, respectively. Trump's 2017 tax cut, by contrast, was estimated to be about 1% of GDP. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, a fiscal watchdog group, found in 2017 that the framework for Trump's tax cuts would make them the fourth largest since 1940 in inflation-adjusted dollars and the eighth largest since 1918 as a percentage of gross domestic product, military equipment, and Afghanistan. After talking about the state of U.S. military equipment, Trump said, "We gave $85 billion of it back to Afghanistan, if you can believe it. We gave them $85 billion. Facts first, Trump's $85 billion figure is false. While a significant quantity of military equipment that had been provided by the U.S. to Afghan forces was indeed abandoned to the Taliban upon the U.S. withdrawal, the Defense Department has estimated that this equipment had been worth about $7.1 billion, a chunk of the roughly $18.6 billion worth of equipment provided to Afghan forces between 2005 and 2021. And some of the equipment left behind was rendered inoperable before U.S. forces withdrew. As other fact-checkers have previously explained, the $85 billion is a rounded-up figure. It's closer to $83 billion for the total amount of money Congress appropriated during the war to a fund supporting the Afghan security forces. A minority of this funding was for equipment. The situation before Right to Try. Trump claimed that, before he signed a Right to Try law in 2018 to give terminally ill patients easier access to experimental medications that haven't yet received approval from the Food and Drug Administration, such patients would have no recourse if they did not have the money to travel abroad. He said, "You know, people, if they had money, they'd go to Asia, they'd go to Europe. If they don't have money, they'd go home and die. That's what happened. They'd go home and die." Facts first, it is not true that terminally ill patients would simply have to go home and die without any access to experimental medications or would have to go to foreign countries seeking such treatments until Trump signed the Right to Try law. Prior to the law, patients had to ask the federal government for permission to access experimental medications, but the government almost always said yes. Scott Gottlieb, who served as Trump's FDA commissioner, told Congress in 2017 that the FDA had approved 99% of patient requests under its own expanded access program. Emergency requests for individual patients are usually granted immediately over the phone, and non-emergency requests are generally processed within a few days, Gottlieb testified. The Biden administration and Trump's legal cases. Trump repeated a claim he has made on numerous occasions during his campaign, that the Biden administration orchestrated a criminal election subversion case that was brought against him by a local district attorney in Fulton County, Georgia, a criminal fraud case that was brought against him by a local district attorney in Manhattan, and a civil fraud case that was brought against him by the Attorney General of New York State. Facts first, this is false. There is no evidence that Biden or his administration were behind any of these cases. None of these officials reports to the president or even to the federal government. Attorney General Merrick Garland testified to Congress in early June about the Manhattan case in which Trump was found guilty. The Manhattan District Attorney has jurisdiction over cases involving New York state law, completely independent of the Justice Department, which has jurisdiction over cases involving federal law. We do not control the Manhattan District Attorney. The Manhattan District Attorney does not report to us. The Manhattan District Attorney makes its own decisions about cases that he wants to bring under his state law. As he did in his conversation with Musk, Trump has repeatedly invoked a lawyer on Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg's team, Matthew Colangelo, while making such claims. Colangelo left the Justice Department in 2022 to join the District Attorney's office as senior counsel to Bragg, but there is no evidence that Biden had anything to do with Colangelo's employment decision. Colangelo and Bragg were colleagues in the New York Attorney General's office before Bragg was elected Manhattan District Attorney in 2021. This diet may reduce COVID-19 risk. New research suggests a healthy diet has long been hailed by some experts as one potentially important factor influencing the risk of COVID-19 or how bad someone's case gets. But a team of researchers in Indonesia looked into how a specific lifestyle might affect these odds, finding that following the Mediterranean diet may reduce your risk of getting COVID-19. According to a review published Wednesday in the journal PLOS One, there have been numerous studies that heavily associated COVID-19 with inflammation in the body. While the Mediterranean diet has been long known for its anti-inflammatory properties, said the review's senior author Andre Sayahan, a lecturer and member of the Center of Evidence-Based Medicine at the University of North Sumatra in Indonesia, via email. Through our study, we reported a link that further strengthened the connection between these two. In line with our hypothesis, inflammation has been associated with both the development and severity of COVID-19 since the coronavirus struck in 2019. There have been more than 775 million reported cases of infection, according to the World Health Organization. That number is still growing, with more than 47,000 cases reported within just the week leading up to August 4th, the most recent statistic from the WHO. More than 7 million people have died from COVID-19. To investigate whether the risk of infection and severity may be alleviated by the Mediterranean diet, the team reviewed 6 studies with more than 55,400 participants total across 5 countries and were published between 2020 and 2023. Participants reported their adherence to the Mediterranean diet using questionnaire. To determine COVID-19 cases, studies relied on participants' reports on whether they had been infected, while another study identified cases by both self-reports and tests for antibodies. All studies with findings regarding symptom severity were also based on participants' recollections. 3 studies found a significant association between the Mediterranean diet and reduced risk of coronavirus infection, while 2 other studies showed non-significant results. Across all these studies, participants following the Mediterranean diet had a lower risk of infection, which can't be reliably quantified into a specific number partly due to the variance in significance across studies, Sayahan said. But whether the diet could also reduce the number of symptoms or the severity of disease isn't as clear, said the authors, who graded the evidence on these aspects as low certainty. Only 1 study reported a significant link between greater adherence to the Mediterranean diet and fewer COVID-19 symptoms, yet 3 others found a non-significant relationship. 1 study found the diet reduced the likelihood of severe COVID-19, while 2 others had inconsistent findings. Among the food categories measured in some studies, higher consumption of olive oil, fruit, and nuts, lower consumption of cereal and red meat, and moderate intake of alcohol were associated with a lower risk of coronavirus infection. Eating more vegetables, fruits, legumes, nuts, fish, and whole grains was linked with lower odds of severe COVID-19. These results could have significant public health implications, underscoring the importance of optimal nutrition in preventing both communicable and non-communicable diseases, said Dr. Jordi Marino, Associate Professor at the Novo Nordisk Foundation Center for Basic Metabolic Research at the University of Copenhagen in Denmark. Marino wasn't involved in the review. Unanswered questions. The review provides only preliminary insights, Marino added, so important shortcomings that affect the reliability of the findings should be kept in mind. Those include that all the studies were observational, so the results offer correlations, but don't prove the Mediterranean diet does or doesn't have protective effects against COVID-19, said Lisa Dreyer, a nutritionist, author, and CNN Health and Nutrition contributor who wasn't involved in the review. This is a big limitation in nutrition research, as it only looks at associations between lifestyle factors and health outcomes, Dreyer said via email. Factors other than diet, but associated with the Mediterranean diet, could play a role in the findings. These aspects that can affect the results, if not controlled for, are known as confounding factors. Many of the studies didn't take these into account, which could have influenced findings about the effectiveness of the diet. Those include critical factors that have been well established as contributing to COVID-19 risk and severity, such as obesity, diabetes, and social determinants of health, including access to healthy food, Marino said. The interplay between these things is complex and cannot be fully understood in isolation, Marino added. The studies that didn't adjust for confounding factors reported significant association, while 2 studies that adjusted for confounding factors reported non-significant association, the authors wrote. Additionally, the self-reporting of health information, in this case, COVID-19 and diet history, is prone to biased responses, such as inaccurate memory of what someone ate or how much they consumed certain foods, according to the study. Exposure to COVID-19, which wasn't measured in the studies, is another major factor in determining a person's risk of infection, Dreyer said, much more so than diet, given these loose ends. More research is needed before definitive conclusions can be drawn, the authors said, improving diet for disease risk. While short-term dietary changes may have a limited impact on the risk of COVID-19, the long-term benefits of a sustained healthy diet could be larger, Marino said. These foods are rich in antioxidants, fiber, and micronutrients that enhance immune function and may help boost our natural microbiome and reduce inflammation, said Dr. Sarah Seidelman, Assistant Professor of Clinical Medicine at the Columbia Vagelos College of Physicians and Surgeons, via email. Regardless of how protective the Mediterranean diet may be against getting COVID-19 or developing severe symptoms, it's a healthy and delicious lifestyle choice that Dreyer recommends and follows herself, she said. The Mediterranean diet has also been found to be helpful for reducing the risk or severity of heart disease, stroke, dementia, breast cancer, high cholesterol, memory loss, depression, and more. We are aware that changing someone's diet may not be easy. However, slowly adjusting and incorporating the Mediterranean diet elements one by one into your life would be a good idea, said Sayahan, the senior author. Those include fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, fish, and olive oil, while reducing red meats and processed foods, Seidelman said. But most importantly, getting vaccinated remains the best and safest protection against COVID-19-related hospitalization, long-term health outcomes, and death, according to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. In addition to strategies such as vaccination and mask wearing, by adopting healthy dietary practices and addressing underlying health disparities, we can enhance population resilience and improve overall health outcomes, Marino said. Tiny shards of plastic are increasingly infiltrating our brains. Study says human brain samples collected at autopsy in early 2024 contain more tiny shards of plastic than samples collected 8 years prior. According to a preprint posted online in May, a preprint is a study which has not yet been peer-reviewed and published in a journal. The concentrations we saw in the brain tissue of normal individuals who had an average age of around 45 or 50 years old were 4,800 micrograms per gram, or 0.5% by weight, said lead study author Matthew Campan, a Regents Professor of Pharmaceutical Sciences at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. Compared to autopsy brain samples from 2016, that's about 50% higher, Campan said. That would mean that our brains today are 99.5% brain and the rest is plastic. That increase, however, only shows exposure and does not provide information about brain damage, said Phoebe Stapleton, an associate professor of pharmacology and toxicology at Rutgers University in Piscataway, New Jersey, who was not involved in the preprint. It is unclear if, in life, these particles are fluid, entering and leaving the brain, or if they collect in neurological tissues and promote disease, she said in an email. Further research is needed to understand how the particles may be interacting with the cells and if this has a toxicological consequence. The brain samples contain 7% to 30% more tiny shards of plastic than samples from the cadaver's kidneys and liver, according to the preprint. Studies have found these plastics in the human heart, the great blood vessels, the lungs, the liver, the testes, the gastrointestinal tract, and the placenta, said pediatrician and biology professor Dr. Philip Landrigan, director of the Program for Global Public Health and the Common Good and the Global Observatory on Planetary Health at Boston College. It's important not to scare the hell out of people because the science in this space is still evolving and nobody in the year 2024 is going to live without plastic, said Landrigan, who was not involved with the preprint. For the study, researchers examined brain, kidney and liver tissues from 90 people who underwent a forensic autopsy to verify cause of death in both 2016 and 2024. Brain tissue samples were gathered from the frontal cortex, the area of the brain associated with thinking and reasoning, and which is most affected by frontotemporal dementia, FTD, and later stages of Alzheimer's disease. Based on our observations, we think the brain is pulling in the very smallest nanostructures, like 100 to 200 nanometers in length, whereas some of the larger particles that are a micrometer to 5 micrometers go into the liver and kidneys, Campan said. Microplastics are fragments that can range from less than 0.2 inch 5 millimeters, or about the size of a pencil eraser, to 1 nanometer. A strand of human hair is about 80,000 nanometers wide, according to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Anything smaller is a nanoplastic that must be measured in billionths of a meter. Nanoplastics are the most worrisome plastics for human health, experts say, because the minuscule pieces can take up residence inside individual cells. Somehow these nanoplastics hijack their way through the body and get to the brain, crossing the blood-brain barrier, Campen said. Plastics love fats or lipids, so one theory is that plastics are hijacking their way with the fats we eat, which are then delivered to the organs that really like lipids. The brain is top among those. The human brain is about 60% fat by weight, far more than any other organ. Essential fatty acids, such as omega-3 South, are key to the strength and performance of the brain cells. Since the human body can't produce essential fatty acids on its own, they must come from food or supplements. Diet is the main route of exposure for micro and nanoplastics, said Landrigan, who is the lead author of a March 2023 report from the Minderoo, Monaco Commission on Plastics and Human Health, a global consortium of scientists, healthcare workers, and policy analysts charged with following plastics from creation to final product. In that report, the consortium determined plastics are associated with harms to human health at every single stage of the plastic life cycle. Some microplastics are also airborne, Landrigan said. For example, when people are driving down the highway and their tires are abrading on the surface of the highway, a certain amount of microplastic particles are thrown into the air. If you live near the coast, some of the microplastic particles that are in the ocean get kicked into the air through wave action, he said. So ingestion is probably the dominant route, but inhalation is also an important route. Plastics with ties to cancer. Polyethylene, which is used in plastic bags, films, and bottles, and is not biodegradable, was the predominant type of plastic found in tissue samples. It was found in greater quantities in the brain than in the liver or kidney, according to the preprint. Polyethylene was also the predominant type of polymer found in human and dog testicles, according to an August 2024 study by Campen and his team. The production of various forms of polyethylene, such as polyethylene terephthalate PET plastics, are the biggest contributor to the release of the solvent 14-dioxane into the environment, according to industry data collected by Defend Our Health, an environmental advocacy group. The U.S. National Toxicity Program and the International Agency for Research on Cancer considers 14-dioxane to be possibly carcinogenic to humans. In 2023, the EPA released a draft report saying that the solvent poses an unreasonable risk of injury to health for plastics workers and community residents whose drinking water has been polluted by discharges from PET plastics factories. The biggest question is, okay, what are these particles doing to us? Honestly, there's a lot we still don't know, Landrigan said. What we do know with real certainty is that these microplastic particles are like Trojan horses. They carry with them all the thousands of chemicals that are in plastics, and some are very bad actors. By invading individual cells and tissues in major organs, nanoplastics can potentially interrupt cellular processes and deposit endocrine-disrupting chemicals such as bisphenols, phthalates, flame retardants, heavy metals, and pearl and polyfluorinated substances, or PFAS. Endocrine disruptors interfere with the human reproductive system, leading to genital and reproductive malformations, as well as female infertility and a decline in sperm count, according to the Endocrine Society. We have some pretty good indications that microplastics and nanoplastics cause harm, even though we are a long way from knowing the full extent of that harm, Landrigan said. I would say we have enough information here that we need to start taking protective action, learn to use less plastic. There are many steps individuals can take to reduce their exposure to plastics and their plastic footprint, experts say. It's hard to avoid foods wrapped in plastic film, but be sure to take the food out of the plastic wrapping before you cook it or put it in the microwave, Landrigan said. When you heat plastic, that accelerates the movement of the microplastics out of the wrapping into the food. Invest in a zippered fabric bag and ask the dry cleaner to return your clothes in that, instead of those thin sheets of plastic, suggested the Natural Resources Defense Council, an environmental advocacy group. Bring a travel mug to the local coffee store for takeout and silverware to the office to cut back on plastic cups and utensils. Don't use plastic bags when you go shopping. Use a cloth bag or a paper bag or a recycle bag. Try to avoid plastic water bottles if you can possibly do so, Landrigan said. A March 2024 study found 1 liter of bottled water the equivalent of 2 standard-size bottled waters typically purchased by consumers, contained an average of 240,000 plastic particles from 7 types of plastics. Some 90% of those were nanoplastics. Use a metal or glass drinking cup instead of a plastic cup. Store your food in glass containers instead of in plastic ones, Landrigan said. Work in your local community to ban plastic bags, as many communities around the United States have now done. There's a lot you can do. These scientists want to safeguard Earth's species by cryogenically preserving them on the Moon. A group of scientists has devised a plan to safeguard Earth's species in a cryogenic biorepository on the Moon. Intended to save species in the event of a disaster on Earth, the plan makes use of craters that are permanently in shadow, and therefore cold enough to allow cryogenic preservation of biological material without using electricity or liquid nitrogen. According to research from a group led by scientists at the Smithsonian, published last week. The paper, published in the journal Bioscience, draws on the successful cryopreservation of skin samples from a fish and outlines a method for creating a biorepository that would keep samples of other species safe. Initially, a lunar biorepository would target the most at-risk species on Earth today, but our ultimate goal would be to cryopreserve most species on Earth, said Mary Hagedorn, a research cryobiologist at the Smithsonian's National Zoo and Conservation Biology Institute (NZCBI) and lead author of the paper. We hope that by sharing our vision, our group can find additional partners to expand the conversation, discuss threats and opportunities, and conduct the necessary research and testing to make this biorepository a reality. The idea of the lunar biorepository is inspired by the Global Seed Vault in Svalbard, in Norway's Arctic, which stores more than 1 million seed varieties with the aim of safeguarding crop diversity. The vault was threatened by a flood of meltwater from thawing permafrost in 2017, highlighting the dangers posed by climate change, according to the statement. Although plant cells can be stored in Arctic conditions, animal cells must be kept even colder, at least -320 degrees Fahrenheit or -196 degrees Celsius, to be preserved. In order to reach the required temperatures on Earth, a supply of liquid nitrogen, electricity, and human staff are required. But in the event of a global disaster, the supply of any of these 3 elements could be vulnerable, putting the mooted biorepository in danger. To reduce this risk, Hagedorn and the team thought about how cryopreservation could be achieved passively, which is impossible on Earth, and alighted on the Moon. The lunar polar regions are home to craters that are in permanent shadow due to their orientation and depth, and can reach temperatures as low as -410 degrees Fahrenheit to 146 degrees Celsius. The team then considered how to block radiation that would damage the DNA of the samples and proposed storing them underground or inside a structure with walls made from lunar rocks. Further research is needed to study the effects of radiation exposure on cryopreserved samples, as well as the effects of microgravity, according to the statement. We aren't saying, what if the Earth fails? If the Earth is biologically destroyed, this biorepository won't matter, Hagedorn said in the statement. This is meant to help offset natural disasters and, potentially, to augment space travel. Life is precious and, as far as we know, rare in the universe. This biorepository provides another, parallel approach to conserving Earth's precious biodiversity, she said. Rob Brooker, head of ecological sciences at the James Hutton Institute in Scotland, who was not involved in the research, said the paper is an interesting and provocative article that highlights the loss of Earth's biodiversity and the critical need to increase our efforts for nature conservation. However, a major concern is that the cost and effort involved in establishing such a resource on the Moon would be very substantial and would detract from ongoing conservation efforts, including delivering existing international commitments and plans to protect nature. Brooker told CNN. Sally Keith, a senior lecturer in marine biology at Lancaster University, who was not involved in the research, had similar concerns. The broad approach offers an interesting thought experiment and might lead to innovative technological development. However, I am hard-pressed to see its use in the urgent fight to minimize rapid biodiversity loss, she told CNN, adding, how many forests, coral reefs, and freshwater lakes could be better conserved right now, for the cost of launching a rocket to the Moon? These cities will be too hot for the Olympics. By 2050, the Paris Olympics opened with rain on its parade, then blistering heat and, finally, a week of pleasant sunshine. As it comes to a close on Sunday, temperatures are expected to again soar up to 95 degrees Fahrenheit or 35 degrees Celsius. The only certainty about Summer Olympics weather is that there's really no certainty at all. Extreme heat is a growing threat for elite athletes, with cases of heat exhaustion and heat stroke becoming more common as fossil fuel pollution pushes temperatures and humidity levels up. Spectators, especially those who fly in from cooler climates, are vulnerable to extreme heat as well. Most of the world's cities will be unable to host the games during summer in the coming decades as they blow past the threshold of safe humid heat. According to a CNN analysis of data from Carbonplan, a climate science and analytics-focused nonprofit group, the big picture. Heat stress can be measured with something called wet bulb globe temperature, a combination of heat, humidity, wind speed, sun angle, and cloud cover. Carbonplan found that by 2050, heat stress in almost all cities in the eastern part of the U.S. would shoot well past the 82.1 degree limit, beyond which experts recommend canceling sporting events. In other words, holding the summer games in these cities would be a huge health risk for the athletes. The superhumid states around the Gulf of Mexico, from Florida to the eastern half of Texas, would be well off the table. The games held in 1996 in Atlanta simply wouldn't be possible in 2050. Much of eastern China, including Beijing and Shanghai, would be well above the limit, as would Hong Kong and huge swaths of Southeast Asia. Suggestions to change the timing of the Summer Olympics so it doesn't coincide with peak heat are growing louder, and it has been done before. Sydney, which swelters in the summer, held the 2000 Games in September and October during the Southern Hemisphere's spring. Brazil's Rio de Janeiro held the 2016 Games in August, when its winter temperatures average a comfortable 70 degrees or so. Cities in northwest Europe, like London, Oslo, and Stockholm may become more attractive for the event, while Mediterranean cities, including Palermo in Sicily and Spain's Seville, are mostly over the threshold. High-elevation South American cities could also become more appealing as global temperatures warm. Bidders for the 2036 Games. The next Summer Games will be in Los Angeles, a city whose temperature is pleasantly moderated by the cool Pacific Ocean. The Games of 2032 are set for Brisbane in the northern Australian state of Queensland, a city that gets so hot in the summer, it will hold the event during its winter in late July ideal, given its summer then for much of the world. A Brisbane winter doesn't drop far below 50 degrees. More than 10 countries have expressed interest in hosting the 2036 Summer Olympics, according to reports, but only 6 have made their bids public or official. India is bidding its western city of Ahmedabad, and Indonesia its under-construction new capital, Nusantara. Qatar is pitching Doha, while Turkey is bidding Istanbul. Poland and Chile are putting forward their capitals, Warsaw and Santiago. Nearly all of them will, at some point, breach the heat stress limit, Carbonplan's data shows. Only Santiago is below the threshold year-round, including at the hottest part of summer. Ahmedabad and Doha would be well over the limit in the summer months, but could potentially pitch for their cooler seasons. Throughout much of the world, the worst heat of the year unfortunately coincides with when the Summer Olympics are typically held. Oriana Chegwidden, a climate scientist with Carbonplan, told CNN, and heat could indeed pose significant risks in the countries bidding for the Olympics in 2036. She said that if these locations were chosen, heat risks could be reduced with some simple measures. For example, planners could mitigate heat risks by starting before or after the peak of summer, or by holding events at night or in the early morning when it is cooler. She added that countries might consider bidding for cities with cooler climates, like those at higher elevations they hosted once. They may not again. Some of the cities that have already hosted the Summer Games will be way beyond safe temperatures by 2050. Beijing, which hosted in 2008, would be much too hot and humid, with heat stress forecast to soar past 90 degrees. Athens, Rome, Atlanta, Tokyo, and Seoul would also be too hot, as would Barcelona. The Southern Hemisphere cities, Sydney and Brisbane in Australia, as well as Rio de Janeiro, all technically hit the too hot list, but could still host in their cooler seasons. It's not as if the world will only see this happen mid-century. Tokyo 2020, held in 2021 after the pandemic delayed the games, were the hottest on record, with heat stress shooting well past the safety threshold to above 89 degrees. Around 1 in 100 athletes suffered heat-related illnesses in Tokyo. Extraordinarily, not a single person was hospitalized, in part due to Japan's preparations. As it became clear extreme heat would hit the Japanese capital, a densely built city of skyscrapers that trap urban heat, organizers moved the marathon and walking events to the cooler, mountainous city of Sapporo. Still, it was too hot and humid, and 6 runners and walkers suffered exertional heat stroke, which is brought on by intense activity in extreme heat and can lead to organ failure and death. Yuri Hosokawa, an assistant professor of sports sciences at Waseda University in Japan, headed the heat response plan in Sapporo for the event. Exertional heat stroke, the most severe form of heat illness, when that happens, we need to make sure that the person is treated immediately, ideally within 30 minutes of collapse, she told CNN, and in order for us to do that, we needed to establish a protocol where these individuals are not transported to hospital, but they're actually treated on site. Hosokawa and her teams treated cases of heat stroke and heat exhaustion by immersing people in ice baths to bring down their body temperatures. Someone suffering heat stroke is unable to thermoregulate to bring down their body temperature without external cooling. Cold water immersion, or an ice bath, is the most efficient way of cooling someone rapidly, Hosokawa said. But some athletes in Tokyo were hesitant to take an ice bath, and if they were cohesive and not yet at the point of heat stroke, they were treated with rotating towels that had been soaked in ice-cold water. Hosokawa is one of many experts calling on sports communities globally to change how sports are scheduled, but also to relax certain rules. Allowing more substitutions in a football match to prevent athletes from dangerous overexertion is a simple example. If we just cancel sporting events when it gets hot, that could seriously take away an opportunity from everyone, she said. I love sports, and I want sports culture to stay, and I want my children to also play sports when they grow up. But if we want to do that, we need to seriously think about rule changes and scheduling. These remarkable horse breeds are like no other on Earth in the middle of the North Atlantic Ocean, about 100 miles from the Canadian province of Nova Scotia. There's a small sliver of land that is populated entirely by wild horses. These horses, about 450 of them, are the only full-time residents of Sable Island. There's really nowhere else like it on Earth, and it's one of those places that I think very easily puts you into perspective about our place in this world, said Drew Doggett, a photographer and filmmaker who has been visiting the Canadian island for more than 10 years. You're on this teeny tiny speck of sand in the middle of the North Atlantic, and you've never felt so small. Yet you're amongst these animals that are thriving in this place that is nothing but sand and dune grasses and a few freshwater ponds. For more than 250 years, horses have been living on the remote, crescent-shaped island, which has a land area of just 13 square miles. They're one of the remarkable breeds Doggett photographed for his new coffee table book, Untamed Spirits, Horses from Around the World. His images celebrate the beauty and enduring appeal of horses by documenting some of the most exceptional on Earth. Their stories of survival and ability to thrive in these places that man oftentimes has not been able to. It's awe-inspiring, he said. Some of Doggett's most striking photos came out of Iceland, which is home to a rugged breed descended from the original Viking horse. They live a very surreal and otherworldly existence, Doggett said. There are some pretty remarkable geological features, from black sand beaches to dramatic waterfalls, that I wanted to photograph these horses amongst. The photos look like something out of a fairy tale or a fantasy novel, artfully shot in front of Iceland's stunning backdrop. They've created their own fortune in this really difficult, yet beautiful land, and that's something that attracted me to their story, Doggett said. Another breed that Doggett features in his book are the white horses of Camargue. This ancient breed is native to a remote, marshy area in the south of France, where it has roamed for centuries. Large, dark, expressive eyes and a palpable, innate confidence punctuate the raw, bold beauty of the Camargue horses, Doggett says in his book. They move swiftly, without hesitation, and charge through the water in the natural hierarchy that inevitably arises within their ranks. These horses are semi-wild, protected by herdsmen known as guardians, or the cowboys of the Riviera. There's been cave paintings discovered in this region of these horses from probably prehistoric times, Doggett said. So there's this lineage that was fascinating. Wild breeds were Doggett's initial fixation when he started this project, but his book also includes portraits of world-class sport horses from the equestrian world. He set up a mobile studio in Barnes in Wellington, Florida, and drew on his background in fashion photography. I was focusing on the musculature of these horses almost as if they're kind of carved from marble, and I was using studio lights, almost painting them with light, he said. I really enjoyed being able to hone in and focus on, in a very intensive way, the physical attributes of these elite animals. When Doggett wanted to do a series of images showing this musculature in motion, he went to the Caribbean and photographed horses swimming in the crystalline waters off the island of Tobago. He linked up with a non-profit rescue group that cared for retired racehorses, polo horses, and show jumpers. As their daily exercise, the owners of the non-profit would swim them off the waters of the beach in Tobago, he said. This is part of their everyday existence. Doggett would put on scuba gear and take photos below the water's surface, difficult, he said, but extremely rewarding. I felt like underwater was a way which I could highlight these animals' elegance and grace in a minimalist backdrop, he said. Across all of his different photo shoots, Doggett felt there was a common theme among the horses, an untamed spirit that inspired the title of his book. Whether they're domesticated or not, their wildness never truly disappears, he said. They also represent strength, resilience, courage, endurance, all these various qualities that I am drawn to and want to celebrate. He believes horses have a universal appeal that transcends cultural boundaries. They represent a certain mythological and symbolic-like ideology that doesn't really exist in other animals, he said. They're respected and honored symbols around the world. I think there's something incredibly romantic about the notion that there are these animals out there which exist that are so strong and courageous yet their wildness can't ever be tamed. Drew Doggett's book Untamed Spirits, Horses from Around the World, published by Tenews, is now available. Thin eyebrows are back, but should they be? Good news for anyone who permanently decimated their eyebrows in the 1990s with a pair of tweezers and bad lighting. The barely their brow is making a comeback. Big-browed beauties like Cara Delevingne and Zoe Kravitz have shaped grooming standards for well over a decade, but if trend forecasts and red carpets are anything to go by, less is more once again. The 90s beauty redux is evident everywhere from TikTok to Paris Fashion Week, where earlier this year, makeup artist Pat McGraw painted the finest of curved lines high on the models' foreheads for the Maison Margiela show, concealing their natural eyebrows below. Then in May, the Met Gala was awash with barely their brows, with Zendaya, FKA Twigs, and Doja Cat each opting for either bleached-out or wafer-thin styles. But what suits the bone structure of supermodel or Hollywood starlet can often end up looking decidedly different on mere mortals. I've definitely noticed the return of the skinny brow, but today's version focuses on sculpting and accentuating your features rather than tweezing them pencil-thin, says British brow artist Holly Parks. If you're considering slimming your brow, I highly recommend booking an appointment with an expert. While the skinny brow look is being increasingly seen on social media, brow expert Kamini Vagala, who has been threading the eyebrows of A-listers and royals from her London salon for over 35 years, warns against imitating anyone else when it comes to beauty. Eyebrows are, she said, completely individual and need to be treated as such, no matter what fashion tells us to do. She recalls seeing an image of Twiggy at the height of her fame in the 1960s and honing in on her eyebrows. I took one look at her. She had thin, pale eyebrows which suited her, and I knew so many women were going to copy her and look completely ludicrous, she said in a phone interview. I don't believe in eyebrow trends at all. It's about what suits the individual. No shape can suit everyone, Kamini, who was born and raised in Zimbabwe but is of Indian heritage, credits herself with bringing threading to the West in 2001 and works on the basis that eyebrow form should be based on bone structure, eye shape, skin tone, and hair color. My eyebrows have never recovered from their overplucking in the 90s, revealed Jenny Parks, 42, from London. They grew back oddly shaped and uneven. I tried microblading similar to a semi-permanent eyebrow tattoo, which was expensive and by far the most painful cosmetic treatment I have ever had, only for the pigmentation to turn pink. I finally found a solution with permanent makeup brows, and for the first time ever I'm happy with them. So yes, I regret ever plucking them in the first place. A trend that's waxed and waned eyebrow grooming is an extremely lucrative business. The eyebrow services industry in the US is currently estimated to be worth $180 million. But the shifting nature of eyebrow fashion is nothing new and can tell us a lot about the social and political backdrop of the era. There is evidence as far back as ancient Greeks and Romans of particular eyebrow trends. Beauty historian Lucy Jane Santos told CNN, "They are cyclical and will often see them swinging between extremes." In ancient Greece and Rome, it was thick, dark eyebrows that were favored, and even a monobrow was prized. Santos explains how, by contrast, sparse eyebrows were very popular in the Middle Ages, a trend that is evidenced in artworks from the time. Portraits of women from this period in history, Roger van der Weyden's portrait of a lady, for instance, do not boast strong brow energy. Women were plucking both their hairline and their eyebrows, partly to create the illusion of the elongated forehead, she explained. This was thought to be a sign of intelligence and beauty, but it was also to make the face blank, so as to draw attention to their décolletage. Santos explains that this practice was only among wealthy women rather than those who worked the fields. Having the time to spend plucking your eyebrows denotes something about class and leisure time. During the 20th century, the eyebrow trend cycle went much faster. In the 1920s, brows were thin and plucked within an inch of their life, said Santos. Many historians believe this started with actresses in the silent film era, when actresses relied on facial expressions, and so a thin, dark eyebrow was a strong, dramatic nonverbal communicator. Women were going to the cinema and seeing actresses with thin eyebrows and thick kohl liner, and it was new, exciting, and expressed modernity. But by the Second World War, women's brows were thicker and less defined. There is a theory that during wartime ordinary women had more commitments and less time in general to spend on beauty, Santos explained. Why would you be spending time on frivolous things when you could be digging for victory? So, eyebrows were bigger and more natural during this time. Twiggy-style skinny brows dominated for the 60s and much of the 70s, but by the 1980s change was afoot once more, from Brooke Shields to Madonna. Thick and slightly unruly brows were in vogue. Men and their brows. Eyebrow grooming has traditionally pertained to women, certainly in the Europe and the West. In ancient Egypt, men and women wore makeup to accentuate their brows. Santos agrees that men's eyebrows have not been subject to trends nearly as much as women's. However, she cites David Bowie shaving his off in 1974 and notes that this was not widely copied. There just seems to be not much of interest in men's eyebrow grooming going on until eyebrow slits in the 80s, she said. Eyebrow slits, where a section of the eyebrow, usually towards the outer edge, is shaved out to form a clean, hairless, vertical line, are rooted in hip-hop and gang culture. As such, slits are perceived as overtly masculine. A more socially acceptable way for men to groom their eyebrows than waxing, plucking, and shaping. Of course, like Bowie, there have been other men with notable brows, such as Cristiano Ronaldo, who is no stranger to facial topiary. But these men have been exceptions. However, there is plenty of evidence to suggest that eyebrow shaping and tiding is now becoming an important part of men's grooming rituals too. There tends to be two types of male clients who visit our UK salons, explained Shavata Singh, founder of the Shavata Brow Studios, who counts Victoria Beckham, Elle Macpherson, Kate Hudson, and Adele among her clients. Some men, whilst not following trends as such, prefer a more stylized, groomed-to-perfection brow with a high arch to maximize their eyes. Most, however, want to retain an air of natural, rugged rather than ragged masculinity. Science has proven that a strong, full brow that gives the impression of natural masculinity, matched with the impression of a man who takes pride in his appearance, can be incredibly potent when attracting a mate. Of course, brands have responded with eyebrow grooming products geared specifically towards men. Chanel's male makeup range Boy de Chanel offers a long-wearing eyebrow pencil, while Tom Ford for men offers the Brow Definer, a gel which promises to tint and shape the natural brow. Accentuating and working with what you already have seems like best way to go for everyone. But what if you've ruined what you were blessed with? What then? If you're looking to grow and thicken eyebrows, Kamini recommends applying castor oil or any oil at night over pricey growth serums, some of which can carry side effects. Oil is good for stimulating eyebrow hair, and it keeps them soft, she added. It's magic, and remember, just because eyebrow trends wax and wane, doesn't mean yours have to. The pot farm next door. Black market weed operations inundate California suburb, cops say just after dawn on a recent spring morning. Police dressed in tactical gear and armed with a search warrant pounded on the front door of an upscale home in a quiet suburban neighborhood and are outside San Francisco. When no one answered, the officers with California's Department of Cannabis Control, which polices the legal sale of marijuana in the state, took a battering ram to the steel-reinforced door. When the door didn't budge, they used a power saw to cut their way through a fortified back entrance and into the spacious 5-bedroom property. Inside, investigators found precisely what they were looking for: evidence of yet another black market marijuana operation hidden in plain sight amid the cookie-cutter homes of suburbia. They removed 80 pounds of weed from the pricey 2-story home in Antioch, California. With curious neighbors looking on, they repeated the spectacle twice more on the same block that morning in late April. The raids filled a dump truck with about $1 million worth of illicit weed cultivated by unlicensed growers. Although cars were parked in the driveways, no people were found in any of the homes and no arrests were made. Among California's marijuana cops at Cannabis Control, Antioch has developed a reputation as a hub for high-yield, covert indoor grow operations. They have raided at least 60 alleged grow houses in the city over the past 2 years and suspect well over 100 more remain in operation. But that's not all. Investigators say the illegal pot production in Antioch provides a glimpse of a hidden world, one that mirrors a trend playing out not only in California, but in states such as Oklahoma, Oregon, New Mexico, and Maine. Groups of people with apparent ties to foreign countries, most notably China, producing weed in colossal volumes. A CNN investigation has found that, in this unassuming city of 115,000, the minimal consequences and hefty rewards for producing illicit marijuana in huge volumes has led to a whack-a-mole pattern of enforcement and a brazenness on the part of participants, all while neighbors look on in dismay. The unlicensed operations, which can cause house fires and mold, often leave homes in a severely damaged state. Properties deemed uninhabitable by the city after raids are sometimes quickly rehabbed and sold for much more than the prior sale. Throughout, operatives in the schemes are seldom held accountable. The dynamic in Antioch is a microcosm of Greater California, where lax laws on black market weed are doing little to change the state's status as a gargantuan producer of it. The Golden State, whose cannabis enjoys a global reputation similar to that of Napa Valley wines, produces about 40% of the nation's weed, the vast majority of it by unlicensed growers, according to Bo Whitney, an economist who specializes in the cannabis industry. The runner-up state, Oregon, produces less than a fifth of California's output, he said. This means California is fueling a massive underground economy, as 3/4 of the U.S. marijuana market is illegal, Whitney said. Law enforcement officials, including former D leaders and FBI Director Christopher Wray, attribute much of the activity nationwide to Chinese organized crime. In Antioch, the operations bear the hallmarks of the Chinese criminal syndicate, said Bill Jones, chief of law enforcement at the California Department of Cannabis Control. He added that criminal networks made up of Chinese nationals have become the dominant presence in the state's illegal cannabis trade over the past 5 years, eclipsing Mexican cartels. Law enforcement officials said they've seen evidence that the activity in Antioch amounts to organized crime, citing the sophistication of the operations and apparent coordination of some of the people involved. But they declined to elaborate, citing ongoing investigations. A review of search warrant affidavits, online property records, and interviews with neighbors of some of the raided homes showed that the vast majority were owned or occupied by people with Chinese names, in a city where Asians make up about 15% of the population. The home that Cannabis Control agents had to power saw their way into belongs to Samson Liu, a police officer in nearby Oakland, California, CNN found. Cannabis Control declined to say whether Liu lived in the home or had tenants, citing an ongoing investigation. Liu's home not only contained what police said was 80 pounds of illegal marijuana trimmings stashed away in piles of garbage bags. Officials said it was also extensively modified for the sole purpose of cultivation. The doors were fortified. The windows were boarded up. A heavy-duty generator sat in the laundry room to maximize power. Silver industrial air ducts snaked in and out of rooms for ventilation. Almost every U.S. state, even the most liberal, and the federal government considers the cultivation and/or sale of unlicensed marijuana a serious crime that carries felony-level fines and prison time. According to a CNN analysis of data from the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, but in California, the feds in recent years have largely taken a hands-off approach to marijuana, officials say. And under state law, any amount of illegal weed, save a few exceptions, such as the culprit being a registered sex offender or selling it to a child, is a misdemeanor offense. As for the house owned by Liu, cannabis control agents have referred the matter to the Internal Affairs Division of the Oakland Police Department, but have made no arrests in connection with the contraband. CNN's efforts to reach Liu by phone, email, and a visit to his home were unsuccessful. The Oakland Police Department told CNN it is cooperating with outside law enforcement agencies and investigating the case as a personnel matter. Liu was placed on administrative leave the day of the raid in late April, despite the large loads of marijuana and cash taken during roughly 60 raids in Antioch since 2022. Only 2 people associated with the busts in that city have been arrested and charged. Both were given misdemeanors, according to records provided by Cannabis Control. Although the state routinely seizes cash from the raided homes, it does not seize the homes themselves. Of the 60 raided homes in Antioch, about half were fixed up and sold by the original owner, often for a significantly higher amount than the prior sale. After the busts, CNN found. CNN identified one real estate agent who has had a hand in selling for residential homes raided by authorities in Antioch. A review of online property records shows that she herself owns one of those homes, from which $937,000 worth of illicit cannabis was seized during a raid in December. This summer, the agent listed another Antioch home for sale, less than 3 months after it was raided and deemed uninhabitable by the city due to issues related to its past use as an illegal grow house. In a brief interview with CNN, the agent brushed aside questions about her involvement with properties associated with marijuana cultivation. "We pay the fine," the real estate agent said, without elaborating. "There is no problem." The real estate agent's attorney, Darius Chan, said his client is not involved in any illegal operation involving marijuana. Chen acknowledged that his client owns a home that was used for illegal marijuana cultivation, but said she leased the house to a tenant who used it as a grow house. As for her role in real estate transactions involving suspected illicit marijuana operations, Chan said his client learned it only afterwards that the properties had been converted to grow houses. He added that such conversions were a persistent issue in the area. "It is not fair to tie a few houses to her or to tie her to the illegal cannabis operation," the lawyer said. "She's a victim of circumstance. People are smoking pesticides." California, despite its legalization of recreational marijuana in 2016, remains a haven for unlicensed black market entrepreneurs, officials say. Illegal operators ignore the rules and fees of California's highly regulated system under which marijuana can be legally produced and sold. They also skirt taxes and can thus undercut the prices of the legal market, which in California is struggling, in part because of the surplus flowing from the black market. All the while, the rogue entrepreneurs enjoy the protection of doing business in a state where a voter-approved legalization law has a clause that effectively eliminates felony prosecutions when it comes to marijuana. In almost every other state, including Washington and Colorado, the first to legalize recreational marijuana, high-volume producers and/or distributors of illegal weed face felony charges, according to CNN's review of state laws. In California, you can have 7 plants or 70,000 plants, and it still is that same misdemeanor violation, said Siskiyou County Sheriff Jeremiah LaRue, whose sprawling Northern California district is notorious for outdoor illegal marijuana cultivation. "It's actually just a joke," Shannon Dykes, the sheriff of San Bernardino County in Southern California, said the state's weak law creates an environment in which black market growers have lots to gain and little to lose. "It's risk versus reward," Dykes said. Very small risk, very high reward. Unlicensed operators ship their in-demand California product to locations across the United States, including the East Coast, where it's harder to grow outdoors in colder seasons. Meanwhile, the illicit farming of marijuana is associated with a wide array of problems. It can be a magnet for violent crime, such as armed robbery. The grow houses are typically left in degraded condition due to the excessive amounts of power and water needed to produce the crop, which often requires makeshift electrical wiring and leaves walls covered in mold. Workers who tend to the plants are sometimes exploited or even trafficked, cannabis control officials said. One little recognized problem, police say, is that untested weed from illegal growers sometimes finds its way into legal dispensaries where customers don't realize what they're buying. People are smoking pesticides, said Kevin McInerney, a commander with the Department of Cannabis Control. Two recent cases filed in federal court in California offer a rare glimpse into how the more organized rings of grow houses can operate. In one, federal authorities in 2018 alleged that about 100 homes in Greater Sacramento had been purchased by Chinese nationals and converted to weed cultivation centers. The investigation led to money laundering and marijuana manufacturing charges against four co-conspirators, including a real estate broker whose office was located in a strip mall. The down payments for the homes were financed by wire transfers from China. In the other federal case, a real estate agent used millions of dollars from Chinese investors to purchase 9 homes in San Bernardino County that were converted into illegal marijuana cultivation sites. The agent faced life in prison, but after pleading guilty in 2020 to conspiracy to possess, manufacture, and distribute at least 1,000 marijuana plants, he ultimately was sentenced to 6 months. In a letter to the judge, the real estate agent said he was lured into the scheme based on a promise to share in the profits and an assurance that marijuana cultivation was only a misdemeanor. Some politicians and law enforcement officials in the U.S. have gone so far as to theorize that the Chinese government may have a hand in the illicit cannabis grow house operations, or at a minimum are monitoring them. For instance, 2 members of Maine's congressional delegation, an independent and a moderate Democrat, issued a joint press release in February expressing concern about the Chinese Communist Party, CCP-affiliated marijuana cultivation operations in their state and across the nation. But Wray, the FBI director, said at a public hearing earlier this year that while his agency is starting to see more ties between a lot of these growing operations and Chinese organized crime, it hasn't yet found any direct links between the marijuana farms and the Chinese government. You have to steal electricity. CNN interviewed for Mandarin-speaking Chinese nationals who said they worked in the illegal marijuana trade. One of the men, who asked that he not be named due to his immigration status and fear for his safety, said he crossed the Mexican border about a year ago and found work in the underground cannabis market through a Los Angeles area employment agency geared toward recent Chinese immigrants. The man, who spoke with a Mandarin-speaking CNN producer in a series of telephone interviews, said he first spent 7 months working for a friend who runs several unlicensed outdoor greenhouses near Fresno, California. The man said he then moved to the San Diego area, where he helped to produce between 40 and 50 pounds of marijuana a month from inside a home. You have to steal electricity, he told CNN. If you don't steal electricity, the monthly electricity bill will be over $10,000. He said the drug sells for $1,000 a pound and is picked up by Chinese buyers who show up at the door. He doesn't know where it goes from there. Details of the man's account could not be independently verified, but he did provide photos of large bags of marijuana he said were produced as part of the operation. The other 3 men who spoke with CNN shared similar accounts. Vanda Felbab Brown, an expert on transnational crime and non-traditional security threats at the Brookings Institute, said the trafficking of Chinese migrants, many of whom end up cultivating illegal marijuana, appears to be organized by a combination of Chinese criminal networks and Mexican criminal groups. It's something she believes the U.S. government needs to be paying closer attention to. We have been prioritizing China military decision-making, but Chinese organized crime and organized crime more broadly has not been a high priority in intelligence collection, she said. That needs to change. Marijuana houses sold at elevated prices in Antioch and other nearby cities in recent years. Investigators with Cannabis Control began receiving a steady flow of anonymous tips and complaints from neighbors. As they began to investigate, one telltale sign of cultivation was off-the-charts usage of power. There was one neighbor, she got her PG&E utility bill, and it was for $40,000, said Jones of Cannabis Control. And she's like, whoa, the bill, it turned out, had landed in the wrong mailbox. It belonged to a grow house across the street. In one raid this spring, authorities found about $1 million worth of illegal weed in a spacious 5-bedroom home on Shell Ridge Way. City records obtained by CNN show that an inspector deemed the house uninhabitable on the day of the raid in March, citing a fire hazard and a lot of chemicals that he believed were ending up in the house's drainage system. The inspector came back less than a month later and removed the designation. By June it was back on the market, described as a dream home, listed for $889,000, nearly $200,000 more than it sold for in 2020. McInerney of Cannabis Control said untangling what he suspects are the complex networks behind illegal grow houses will require not only more resources, but also a fundamental culture change at his own agency, one he is pushing to achieve. The idea, he said, is to supplement the current narcotics investigation approach of surveilling suspicious characters and banging down doors, the fun stuff, as he said it with another dimension, the duller white-collar work of delving into paperwork. That's where we can get the people that are making the money, McInerney said, but we're swimming upstream. Regardless of whether organized crime is at play, the phenomenon strikes some Antioch residents as not only strange, but frustrating. Bill Tilson, who lives on the same block where 3 homes were raided this spring, including that of the Oakland police officer, told CNN that he'd since seen people associated with the homes cleaning the properties, removing marijuana-growing equipment, and putting one of the houses up for sale. Price tag, $900,000. The whole dynamic struck him as unfair. It's like, yeah, we'll buy these houses, we'll use them as a grow house. It's a misdemeanor. No big deal, Tilson said. Where are the higher-up people, the politicians? He asked. I mean, they're letting them get away with this. The new secret to unlock restful sleep. Evening exercise breaks. The importance of sleep for overall health cannot be overstated. It improves mood, boosts energy, and lowers disease risk, to name just a few benefits. Yet many people struggle to achieve restful nights. In the United States, 39% of adults ages 45 to 64 report not getting enough sleep, according to a 2022 survey by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Now, a small efficacy study published July 16 in the journal BMJ Open Sport and Exercise Medicine suggests a simple and effective strategy to improve sleep duration, incorporating short resistance or strength training, exercise breaks in the evening. Based on the findings, this novel approach could transform the way people think about pre-bedtime routines and offer a practical solution for those needing more sleep. Mini strength training breaks in the PM conducted by researchers from the University of Otago in New Zealand. The small study investigated the impact of regular 3-minute bouts of resistance exercise every 30 minutes over a 4-hour period in the evening. Wearing activity monitors, 28 healthy female non-smokers ages 18 to 40 years old, who typically experience prolonged sitting during the workday and in the evening, either engaged in activity breaks or remained seated for the duration in a supervised lab setting. The findings were compelling. The participants slept an average of 27.7 minutes longer when they took regular exercise breaks compared with when they sat uninterrupted. Additionally, there were no significant differences in sleep efficiency or the number of awakenings, indicating that the short exercise sessions did not disrupt other aspects of sleep quality. Even the researchers said the results were unexpected. Given the current sleep hygiene guidelines, we were surprised to see such a positive impact on sleep, said lead study author Jennifer Gale, doctoral student of human nutrition at the University of Otago, according to Gale. Most traditional sleep hygiene advice discourages longer bouts of intense exercise close to bedtime because it can increase body temperature and heart rate, which is widely believed to negatively impact sleep quality. However, this study challenges that notion. Our research found that interrupting evening sitting time with short bursts of light-intensity exercise improved sleep duration and did not disrupt sleep quality, Gale added via email. The study's author suggests that it's more about doing the right types of exercise at the right time that enhances rather than hinders sleep. The brief and less intense nature of the study exercises means they are less likely to elevate body temperature and heart rate to levels that could potentially interfere with sleep. Dr. Raj Dasgupta, Associate Professor of Clinical Medicine at Huntington Health in California, stressed the importance of keeping the exercises short and not too intense so they can help you sleep better without making you overly energized before bed. He was not involved in the study. Dasgupta said this approach could be particularly helpful for those who spend a lot of time sitting in their daily routines, offering a simple way to combat a more sedentary lifestyle without making significant adjustments. Gail and her team are currently conducting a follow-up pilot study to explore the question of how to best support people in performing the right sleep-improving activity breaks at regular intervals in the evening in a real-world setting. What is resistance training? Resistance training, also known as strength training, involves exercises that cause muscles to contract against an external resistance. The resistance can come from your own body weight, free weights, machines, or resistance bands. Common resistance training exercises include push-ups, squats, and weightlifting. These exercises are designed to improve muscle strength and endurance by working against a force. Dasgupta said that the study used simple and practical resistance exercises that could be performed by most individuals. He emphasized the health benefits beyond improving sleep, adding that strength training enhances quality of life and can help you maintain independence as you age. Start a new evening routine. Below are the 3 specific exercises used in the study, along with another set of comparable alternatives for variety. Based on the research, any similar light to moderate resistance exercises should work. Important note: check with your doctor before beginning this or any new exercise program. As always, listen to your body and adjust the intensity and duration as needed to find what works best for you. Study exercises: chair squats, stand up from a seated position without using your hands and sit back down, repeating for 20 seconds. Calf raises, in a standing position, rise onto your toes, then lower back down, repeating for 20 seconds. Standing knee raises with straight leg hip extensions, alternate lifting each knee toward your chest, followed by extending your leg back for 20 seconds each. If needed, use the back of a chair or wall for support. Alternative exercises: marching in place, lift your knees alternately to hip height while swinging your arms, repeating for 20 seconds. Wall push-ups: stand facing a wall so that you can place your hands on the wall at shoulder height with arms straight and palms down. Perform push-ups against the wall for 20 seconds. Side leg raises: stand with your feet hip-width apart and lift one leg out to the side, then lower it back down, repeating for 10 seconds on each side for a total of 20 seconds. Support yourself by holding a chair back or wall if you need assistance with balance. Repeat either set or any variation of 3 of the above exercises 3 times, totaling 3 minutes, every 30 minutes over for hours in the evening. Start these breaks around 4 p.m. or 5 p.m., concluding at least 1 hour before your intended sleep time to allow your body to settle and prepare for rest. In total, this adds up to 24 minutes of exercise each evening. Benefits of reducing sedentary behavior: prolonged sitting, especially in the evening, has been linked to adverse health outcomes, including an increased risk of heart disease and diabetes. By incorporating short bursts of activity, individuals can break up their sedentary time and potentially mitigate some of these risks. According to the study results, beyond improving sleep, evening activity breaks may also benefit overall health by improving postprandial metabolism, or how your body processes the nutrients you eat, and reducing the risk of cardiometabolic diseases. Gail pointed to this finding as one of the main takeaways of the study, saying that interrupting evening sitting time has the potential to improve your health in multiple ways. The key is to get up frequently and move your body, she added. Dasgupta agreed and said the findings were very promising and drew valuable conclusions despite the study's small size. Adding quick, simple, and light resistance exercise breaks to your evening routine could be a simple way to improve your sleep and health, he said. So, why not give it a try tonight? Better sleep could be just a few short exercise breaks away. The most beautiful flags in the world. Flags are more than just pieces of fabric. They are powerful symbols that represent the identity, history, and values of a nation. Some flags stand out not only for their symbolic meaning, but also for their stunning designs. Here, we take a look at some of the most beautiful flags in the world, celebrating their aesthetic appeal and the stories behind them. 1. Bhutan. The flag of Bhutan is a striking design featuring a dragon, known as the Thunder Dragon Druk, against a vibrant background of yellow and orange. The yellow represents the secular authority of the king, while the orange signifies the spiritual tradition of Buddhism. The dragon, clutching jewels in its claws, symbolizes the protection and prosperity of the nation. 2. Brazil. Brazil's flag is a vibrant and colorful design that perfectly captures the spirit of the country. It features a green field with a large yellow diamond in the center, inside which is a blue globe with 27 white stars arranged in the pattern of the night sky over Rio de Janeiro. The globe also contains the national motto, Ordem e Progresso, order and progress. The green and yellow represent the royal colors of the Braganza Habsburg dynasty. 3. Canada. The Canadian flag, also known as the maple leaf, is one of the most recognizable and beautiful flags in the world. It features a simple yet striking design, a red field with a white square at its center, which contains a stylized red maple leaf. The maple leaf has long been a symbol of Canada, representing the country's natural beauty and vast forests. 4. Japan. Japan's flag, known as the Nishoki or Hinomaru, is a timeless design of elegance and simplicity. It consists of a red circle, symbolizing the sun, set against a white background. This minimalist design is deeply rooted in Japan's cultural heritage and is a powerful symbol of purity, integrity, and enlightenment. 5. Nepal. Nepal's flag is unique in its shape, being the only national flag that is not rectangular or square. It consists of two stacked triangles. The upper triangle contains a white moon emitting 8 rays with a crescent attached below, and the lower triangle features a white sun with 12 rays. The crimson red represents the bravery of the Nepalese people, while the blue border signifies peace and harmony. The celestial bodies symbolize the hope that Nepal will last as long as the sun and moon. 6. South Africa. The flag of South Africa is a bold and dynamic design that reflects the country's diversity and unity. It features a green Y shape with a black triangle on the hoist side, a blue field above the Y, and a red field below it. The Y shape is outlined in white, and the flag also includes a gold border around the black triangle. The colors represent different elements of South Africa's history and diverse society. 7. Switzerland. Switzerland's flag is one of the few square flags in the world, and its simplicity and symmetry make it stand out. It features a bold white cross in the center of a red square. The white cross symbolizes neutrality, peace, and honesty, while the red background represents bravery, strength, and freedom. 8. Mexico. Mexico's flag is rich in symbolism and history. It consists of 3 vertical stripes, green, white, and red. The green symbolizes hope and prosperity, the white represents peace and harmony, and the red stands for the blood of national heroes. The central emblem features an eagle holding a snake in its beak and claw, perched on a prickly pear cactus. This imagery is derived from an ancient Aztec legend about the founding of Tenochtitlan, now Mexico City. 9. Sri Lanka. The flag of Sri Lanka, also known as the lion flag, is one of the most intricate and colorful flags in the world. It features a golden lion holding a sword in its right paw, set against a maroon background. This symbolizes the bravery of the nation. The flag also includes 4 golden bow leaves in each corner, representing the 4 Buddhist virtues: loving-kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. 2 vertical stripes in green and orange represent the Tamil and Muslim minorities, respectively, reflecting the country's cultural diversity. 10. United Kingdom. The flag of the United Kingdom, known as the Union Jack, is an iconic and visually striking design. It combines the crosses of the 3 patron saints of the United Kingdom, the red cross of St. George for England, the white saltire of St. Andrew for Scotland, and the red saltire of St. Patrick for Ireland. The result is a bold and symmetrical flag that symbolizes the unity and history of the UK. 11. United States. The flag of the United States, commonly known as the Stars and Stripes, is one of the most recognized flags in the world. It features 13 horizontal stripes alternating red and white, representing the original 13 colonies, and a blue field with 50 white stars, symbolizing the 50 states. The design is a powerful representation of the country's history, unity, and values. 12. Norway. Norway's flag features a simple yet elegant design with a blue cross outlined in white on a red background. The cross is shifted towards the hoist side, a characteristic of Scandinavian flags. The colors red, white, and blue are inspired by the French tricolor and symbolize liberty and independence. The flag reflects Norway's rich heritage and national pride. 13. Greece. The flag of Greece is a striking combination of blue and white stripes with a blue canton containing a white cross. The 9 horizontal stripes represent the syllables of the Greek phrase eleftheria, athanatos, freedom or death, and the cross symbolizes Greek orthodoxy. This flag beautifully captures the essence of Greek history, culture, and religion. 14. South Korea. The flag of South Korea, known as the Taegukgi, is a highly symbolic and aesthetically pleasing design. It features a red and blue yin-yang symbol in the center, surrounded by 4 black trigrams on a white field. The white background symbolizes peace and purity, the yin-yang represents balance in the universe, and the trigrams reflect fundamental principles of reality. This flag harmoniously combines elements of Eastern philosophy and Korean heritage. 15. Estonia. The flag of Estonia is a simple yet striking tricolor of blue, black, and white. The blue symbolizes the sky, sea, and lakes of Estonia. The black represents the suffering and determination of the Estonian people. And the white stands for purity, hard work, and commitment to a brighter future. This flag beautifully encapsulates Estonia's natural beauty and resilient spirit. Flags are powerful symbols that convey the essence of a nation's identity, history, and values. The flags featured here are not only beautiful, but also rich in meaning and symbolism. Whether through their vibrant colors, unique shapes, or intricate designs, these flags capture the imagination and reflect the diverse beauty of our world. Next time you see a flag flying high, take a moment to appreciate the story it tells and the people it represents. The ghost town that has stood empty for more than a century. There's a large and very dignified school in Kayakai. There are narrow streets, lined with houses, that wend and rise up both sides of a steep valley. There's an ancient fountain in the middle of the town. And there are churches, one with million-dollar hilltop views over the Blue Aegean. But, for most of the past 100 years, there have been no people. Kayakai, in southwestern Turkey's Mugla province, is a true ghost town. Abandoned by its occupants and haunted by the past. It's a monument, frozen in time, a physical reminder of darker times in Turkey. With hillsides dotted by countless crumbling buildings, slowly being swallowed by greenery, and endless views into vanished lives, it's also a fascinating and starkly beautiful place to visit. In summer, under clear skies and blazing suns, it's eerie enough. Even more so in cooler seasons, wreathed in mountain or sea mists. Just over a century ago, Kayakai, or Levisi, as it was known, was a bustling town of at least 10,000 Greek Orthodox Christians, many of whom were craftspeople who lived peacefully alongside the region's Muslim Turkish farmers. But in the upheaval surrounding Turkey's emergence as an independent republic, their simple lives were torn apart. Tensions with neighboring Greece after the Greco-Turk War ended in 1922 led to both countries ejecting people with ties to the other. For Kayakai, that meant a forced population exchange with Muslim Turks living in Kavala, in what is now the Greek region of Macedonia and Thrace. But the newly arrived Muslims were reputedly less than happy with their new home, swiftly moving on and leaving Kayakai to fall to ruin. Lingering sadness among the very few who did remain were the grandparents of Asen Ekiz, whose family today runs a small restaurant near the main entrance to Kayakai, which serves refreshments to tourists who come to look around the town. Stories of those difficult years have been passed down through the generations. The Greek people were crying out because they did not want to leave. My grandparents told me, Ekiz, who now sells handmade jewelry to visitors, says. Some even left their kids behind to be looked after by Turkish friends because they thought they would return. But they never did. Ekiz says her grandparents' family were shepherds and easily adapted to life on the edge of town. Most of their fellow transplants, she says, disliked living in Kayakai because walls of the houses were painted blue, supposedly to ward off scorpions or snakes. Snatches of that blue color can still be seen on the surviving walls of the 2,500 or so houses that make up Qiyaqai, although few other decorative touches remain after decades left to the elements. What's left is still worth exploring as a snapshot of an ancient way of life on the brink of the modern age. Jane Akate, the co-author of A Guide to Qiyaqai, says one reason for the abandonment of the town was perhaps the palpable sadness that lingers over the place following the tragic events of the 1920s. Nature has also played its part in the demise of its man-made features. There have been earthquakes, there have been storms. The climate, the weather, the rainstorms. Everything has impacted on this interesting place, she says. And also, over the years, the mortar holding them together has crumbled, and things fall apart if you don't take care of them. Today's visitors pay a €3 fee, just over $3, at a small kiosk on the main road before entering Qiyaqai. From there, they can wander on foot up and down its sometimes steep and uneven lanes and alleyways. Signs at the entrance point to the school, the churches, and the water fountain. It's worth budgeting a couple of hours to take it all in. With few visitors aside from occasional tour groups during peak periods, it's easy to find alone time here, imagining how it once bustled with life, not least in the old town square, where local men would once gather to drink tea and swap stories. Most of the houses, which were built in the century before abandonment, have now lost their roofs and their collapsed walls sprout with vegetation. Some houses have pits in their basement, once used for tanning hides for leather. Shoemaking was a common profession here. Many still have intact cisterns, crucial for storing water in a town without plumbing. Drinking water was carried in on donkeys, says Ekiz. She also grimly recalls how, lacking proper sanitation, residents would use cut-up old clothes instead of toilet paper. These rags were then burned as fuel or scattered on gardens as fertilizer. Despite the frugality of such measures, Ekiz says Qiyaqai was relatively prosperous and was once the area's main commercial hub, surpassing the nearby port of Fethai, which is now a thriving urban center and popular tourist destination. Although this was clearly a close-knit community, Ekiz insists each of the two-story properties here was carefully spaced from its neighbor. All of them were built so that no one had their sunlight blocked out by another, she says. Bitter reflection. One of the most prominent buildings in the town is the Upper Church, a large structure of faded pink stucco walls and barrel-vaulted ceilings. Unfortunately, the building is sealed off due to its dilapidated state, although tantalizing glimpses of it can be enjoyed from many angles. On the highest inland point of the town, the ruins of Qiyaqai's old schoolhouse offer views over the main church and the houses below. Today, a Turkish flag flaps on a pole above the building. Surveying the scene here, Yigit Ulux Timur, on vacation from Turkish capital Ankara, describes Qiyaqai as a dark mirror of our past. This was once a Christian village, now what we see is a bitter reflection of what happened, he says. And because most of the buildings are intact, you can feel what life was like here. There are marked hiking trails that pass through Qiyaqai from nearby towns, but it's easy to get lost wandering the streets. Some alleyways turn into dead ends. Open doorways and stairways beckon everywhere, although due to the dilapidated condition of many of the buildings, visitors are asked to refrain from entering. Across the valley, through the winding streets, the climb to the smaller church is worth doing. It's a steep scramble up through rocks and pine trees over the last few meters, then it opens up to the hill summit. Reflecting the culture of those who lived here, the church resembles the classic small structures often found overlooking villages on Greek islands. It's a tiny, modest building with a domed roof and little unglazed windows. The interior is completely empty. Another Turkish flag flies here, bright red against the deep blue sky. And below, across a thickly forested hillside, are the glistening waters of the Aegean Sea. It's a spectacular view, and one that will have changed little since the days when Qiyaqai was alive with people. Teams across the U.S. hold moments of silence as sports community mourns NHL star Johnny Gaudreau and his brother beloved NHL star Johnny Gaudreau and his brother Matthew were honored around the sports world on Friday following their tragic death in New Jersey late Thursday night. Johnny Gaudreau, 31, and Matthew Gaudreau, 29, were fatally struck by a suspected drunken driver while riding bikes on a New Jersey roadway, officials said, just hours before they were to serve as groomsmen at their sister's wedding in Philadelphia. In her first two Instagram posts since her husband's death, Johnny Gaudreau's widow, Meredith Gaudreau, posted pictures of their family, writing to her husband in the captions, saying, "We are going to make you proud. Thank you for the best years of my life. Despite losing you, I am still the luckiest girl in the world to have been yours. I love you so much. You were perfect. Some days it felt too good to be true. I love every single thing about you. You are my forever, and I can't wait to be with you again. I love you so much forever and ever." The initial post from Saturday morning reads, "The absolute best dad in the world, so caring and loving. The best partner to go through parenthood with. John never missed a single appointment," Gaudreau wrote in a second post, moments later. "Was the best at putting the baby to sleep and the apple of Noah's eye. I love how much he looks like him. We are going to make you proud. We love you so much, Daddy." Gaudreau's team, the Columbus Blue Jackets, called the deaths an unimaginable tragedy in a social media post Friday. In Major League Baseball, the Philadelphia Phillies held an emotional moment of silence prior to their game against the Atlanta Braves at Citizens Bank Park. The team showed a photo of the brothers during their time at Boston College on the video board, while the announcer read a statement before calling for the moment of silence. Phillies players stood along the first base foul line in the emotional tribute. Meanwhile, the New York Yankees, Cleveland Guardians, Los Angeles Angels, and the Cincinnati Reds each held a moment of silence before their games on Friday as well. "We are heartbroken for our friends at the Blue Jackets with the tragic passing of Johnny Gaudreau and his brother Matthew," the Cincinnati Reds said in a statement. "We send our deepest condolences to the Gaudreau family, their friends, the NHL, and the entire Columbus Blue Jackets organization." Throughout the day on Friday, fans paid tribute to the late Blue Jackets star and his brother with a makeshift memorial, leaving flowers, hockey sticks, and other memorabilia outside of the team's nationwide arena in Ohio. Tributes for the brothers will continue into Saturday, as Ohio State's football team have announced that the team will hold a moment of silence before kickoff of their season opening game against the Akron. Members of Major League Soccer's Columbus Crew Nordic supporter section are planning to honor the Blue Jackets forward with a moment of silence during the 13th minute, representing Gaudreau's jersey number of their match against the New York City Football Club at Lower.com Field on Saturday. Suspected drunken driver faces charges. The brothers were riding bicycles around 8:19 p.m. Thursday on a county road in Oldmans Township, a community in southern New Jersey near the Delaware River, when a Jeep Grand Cherokee that was attempting to pass to slower-moving vehicles hit them, according to New Jersey State Police. The Jeep driver, who police identified as 43-year-old Sean Higgins, is charged with 2 counts of vehicular homicide in the second degree, according to the complaint. Through further investigation, Higgins was suspected of being under the influence of alcohol, State Police SGT Jeffrey Lebron said in a news release. Higgins stated he had consumed roughly 5 to 6 beers before the accident, according to a probable cause affidavit filed with the Salem County Superior Court Friday. Mr. Higgins explicitly stated to the effect that his consumption of alcoholic beverages contributed to his impatience and reckless driving, which resulted in the motor vehicle accident, the affidavit states. Higgins made his first appearance in court Friday afternoon, but did not enter a plea, according to Salem County Court Criminal Division Manager Crystal Harris. He is being held without bond at the Salem County Correctional Facility pending a detention motion hearing on September 5, Harris said. During Higgins' court appearance, Judge Michael J. Silvano said the charges against him are punishable by a maximum of 10 years in New Jersey State Prison. Higgins is being represented by a public defense attorney, but he said at the hearing he will hire his own lawyer in the future to represent him. Higgins' employer, Gaudenzia, an addiction treatment provider, said Saturday in a statement he was immediately placed on leave when the company learned of his involvement in the deadly accident. Higgins began working there as the Director of Financial Operations last September, according to his LinkedIn account. "We extend our sympathies to the Gaudreau family during this incredibly difficult time," Gaudenzia said in a statement via Facebook. Johnny Hockey was known for enthusiasm on the ice and kindness off it. The deaths of Johnny Hockey, known for his enthusiasm on the ice and kindness off it, and his brother Matthew, left the sports world mourning. Johnny Gaudreau was drafted by the Calgary Flames in the 4th round of the 2011 NHL draft out of Boston College. He signed with the Columbus Blue Jackets ahead of the 2022-2023 season and tallied 12 goals and 48 assists last season. In 11 seasons in the league, Gaudreau had 143 career goals and 743 points while making 7 All-Star Game appearances. Following news of his death, hockey fans across the U.S. set up memorials in his honor. A makeshift memorial was set up by fans in Columbus, Ohio, Friday. In Canada, fans left flowers on the Scotiabank Saddledome steps to remember Johnny Gaudreau, who played for the Calgary Flames there. Johnny was not only a great hockey player, but more significantly a loving husband, father, son, brother, and friend, the Blue Jackets said in the statement. Johnny played the game with great joy, which was felt by everyone that saw him on the ice. He brought a genuine love for hockey with him everywhere he played, from Boston College to the Calgary Flames to Team USA to the Blue Jackets. He thrilled fans in a way only Johnny Hockey could. The impact he had on our organization and our sport was profound, but pales in comparison to the indelible impression he made on everyone who knew him, the statement said. NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman said in a statement, "While Johnny's infectious spirit for the game and show-stopping skills on the ice earned him the nickname Johnny Hockey, he was more than just a dazzling hockey player. He was a doting father and beloved husband, son, brother, and teammate who endeared himself to every person fortunate enough to have crossed his path." Longtime NHL executive Brian Burke noted in a statement on X that Gaudreau brought kindness that radiated out through the locker room every day. And there were few players in hockey history who matched his passion and love for the game. Johnny was always the first to raise his hand to give back to his community, Burke said. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau also paid tribute to the NHL star. Johnny Gaudreau may have come up from the States, but hockey fans in Calgary and across Canada will remember him as one of our own. Trudeau said in a post on X. Matthew Gaudreau returned to the brothers' alma mater in New Jersey, Gloucester Catholic High School, in 2022 to serve as ice hockey coach, a position he held until this summer. Johnny and Matt were incredible hockey players and students, but even more amazing human beings, Principal Thomas Iacovini Jr. said in a statement released by the school Friday. The Boston College men's hockey team head coach Greg Brown and former head coach Jerry York at a news conference Friday spoke about the impact the brothers had on and off the rink. York recalled the bond between the two brothers being particularly strong and credited Matthew for pushing Johnny to becoming an NHL star. "They brought a ton of joy to the rink. They were happy to be there, truly happy to be there. Big smiles all the time," Brown said of his time coaching the brothers. CNN's Thomas Schlachter, Andy Rose, Jacob Leff, David Close, Emma Tucker, Roxanne Garcia, Sarah Dewberry, and Carol Alvarado contributed to this report.